So we'll have this up on the website in about 24 hours from now. Welcome. We're a great group, 22. Animesh, you're very, very welcome. Good seeing you. So we're 1 minute away. I'll say a quick note of thanks for Data Reply UK, who very kindly support MKAI's work and making these kind of things possible. So check out Data Reply if you're looking for potential AI projects. That's that taken care of. I'm in the lobby of a hotel, so if I'm noisy, then I humbly apologize, but you know I wouldn't miss this for the world. Welcome to the MKAI team. Massive welcome to anybody wearing an MKAI t-shirt, which is making me far too happy. And we're on the hour, so welcome. We're going to be talking about an era beyond smart cities today. This was a thought that came about from some of the interesting new projects that are going on around the world, certain parts of Arab Emirates and places like that are designing our cities of the future. And it felt like a very good time to have that wider conversation with the MKAI community about what do we think we've learned so far and what sort of narrative do we want to create going forward. And the cities of the past, to me, and Raghu is going to just jump on this in a minute and give us his thoughts on this, but they felt very similar really to the approach of a corporation, that if you're planning the data strategy for a city, you know, it would read the same as planning it for a corporation, and they're not the same beast. And cities are wonderfully analog and chaotic, and hey, people want to protest, right? And they want to create art where there shouldn't be art, and they want to play music, and they want to be subversive, and youth want to express themselves. And this really didn't feel like it was getting captured in, you know, sensors and IoT and data and 5G and all the Raghu's nodding here. I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here at all, Raghu, because I know you're going to cover this. But this is where, you know, the brainchild came from. Let's have this conversation. Let's get a better understanding of what we want to see, and then we will take all this information back out into the megasphere, of course, and share what we can. So it's a big welcome from me. I'll just recap on the, I don't know if we call them rules, but the engagements around these sessions. So we love cameras on. These are not webinars, and they never will be. We want to see you guys and girls, right? And everybody else of all flavors and genders. We want to be here together. We want to see lots of conversations on the chat. We would like to hear your views. If there's an opportune time to bring you into the conversation, welcome, Edward, then we will do that. But we're going nowhere. We will close the session in 2 hours, or just under from now, but then we'll have our after party. And we won't close the after party until everybody's said what they want to say on this topic. Welcome, Marcus. About 7 foot tall today. That's the key here. Oh my word, you're out and about. Legend that is. Can we hear you?
I'm the Edward, and Maniche is joining us from the US. Just waiting for her.
Amazing. Edward, where are you? I can't hear
you. Yeah, just here. There we are. We're having a team joining. This is so important, we couldn't miss it.
That's incredible. Seeing you guys together as well. Keep us posted. You know, there's nothing we don't want to cover here. You know, we mentioned data reply, but there is no corporate governance on this MKAI platform. So we want to talk about something, we'll talk about something. We're not scared to go there, but this is a place of kindness and respectful appreciation of everybody's different views. So we're not here to discuss politics. We're here to rise together and raise our understanding of these important moments in history and these convergence of technologies. And so welcome back to anyone who's ever been here with us before. And I see many familiar people, people who rapidly have become my best friends in the world as well, and they know who they are, and others that I'm sure will be my best friends of the future. And to those that are here for the first time, you are so incredibly welcome. I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you find your way into exploring more of the the MKAI world. We're going to do something slightly different. I hope you find this a lot of fun, but I'm going to turn over to my colleague Vermeer, and I'm going to ask him to say a few words to center the room, something of a guided session for about a few minutes now, about 5 minutes. Vermeer, how long have we got with you?
I think 5 minutes is fine. It shouldn't be strict if you need more or less time, but yeah, that sounds good to me.
Well, we're over to you then. Take us to a good place before we begin tonight.
I'll do my best. I mean, in general, it's like meditation has no purpose in itself, but you can have some side effects, you know. I think, you know, you can have a bit of more clarity, like you said, centeredness, more focus. So I actually think that's something really helpful between both the speakers and the audience, is that we can kind of get into a place where we're more engaging or more receptive. I'm just going to go into full screens here. So we can do a bit of breath work and then meditation and just center ourselves. And so feel free to just sit as you're comfortable. I think you could sit up in your chair. If you're walking like Marcus and Edward, it might be a little bit harder to follow, but yeah, just kind of imagine a string pulling the top of your head and your spine. Just align your spine, get comfortable, 2 feet on the floor. You know, just kind of settle into your body. You can put your hands together. You can put your hands out. People like to do that for meditation position. You know, palms facing up on your knees. And we're just going to take asynchronous breaths. And we're going to breathe in. If you don't mind, just if you're mindful of it, just mute yourself so that you can hear. And so what we're going to do is we're not going to do shallow breathing. We're going to breathe from the stomach, from the gut, and as deeply as you can. And what that's going to do is, if you're anxious about your presentation or you're anxious about everybody's watching, just close your eyes. Nobody's judging. And when you breathe into your belly, let it expand. And when you breathe out, you can just close your eyes. So let's do a deep breath in. And out. Eyes closed, eyes open, whatever you like. Just breathe in from the belly, let it expand. Hold it for a second. And out. One more. Breathe in from your belly. Hold it for a second. And out. And you can continue to do that on your own. Just be mindful of your body. Have a higher awareness than you usually do. Recenter yourself. Accept whatever noises are coming. Just feel truly in your body. Just feel centered in yourself. The warmth of your blood running through your veins. The pressure of your feet against the floor. The breath, it's giving you life. It's giving you energy. It's reducing the stress. We'll do one more breath together, deeply in, and then we'll go into some silence after a few words. So one more breath in, fully in, and out. Just breathe naturally. Now, what I would encourage you to do is, just for this 1 or 2 minutes of silence, just imagine yourself as a mountain. And your thoughts should not be judged. Your thoughts are like clouds. Clouds pass over a mountain. But the thoughts do not control the body-mind system. The thoughts do not disturb your awareness. Oh, I have to drive 10 miles later, What am I going to say during my speech? This is awkward. You know, all of those things are just thoughts passing. You are the mountain. Mountains go through seasons. Clouds, they have visitors, they have animals, but they're not disturbed. There's a persistence. So just tap into this centeredness. You are the mountain. Just watch your thoughts pass like clouds, soft, warm clouds. Just breathe naturally. Just let go. Just accept whatever's coming to you. Feel your inner power. It gives you life. It allows you to be who you really are. And just breathe. Something wavers, something disturbs, it's okay. In about 15 seconds, we're going to do a few more breaths together and we'll open our eyes and get back to the session. We'll do 3 more deep breaths. First breath, fully in. Hold it for a moment. And breathe out. Second breath, breathe into your legs, breathe into the ground almost. And out. Final breath, and on the out breath, you can open your eyes. Breathe in. And out. Settle back into your space. Feel comfortable. You're still on Earth. And thank you all so much. I hope that we have a really blessed, clear, productive session. Thank you so much.
Amir, thank you so much, and welcome to new joiners. One of the team whose name won't be mentioned didn't save the page on the Eventbrite with the new Zoom link. Okay, that was me, but hopefully you've all got my mail anyway now, correcting that. Welcome, Team London. How's it all going? Let me spotlight you. Look at that. Great seeing you all.
Hi, everyone.
I love seeing you three together. That's so special.
That's thanks to you, Richard, and MKAI. You bringing the world together, literally. Breaking down barriers. And being a smart city. Look, smart city, smart ceiling, everything.
You got some smart lighting. Yeah. Well, enjoy your evening together. And it's wonderful to you to tune in and say hello.
Thanks all.
Jerry, we are with you. Let's get in and let's get this show on the road, right?
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, and welcome, panelists, members of MKAI's global family, MKAI champions, and guests wherever you are. Friends, we think our production team have put together another fascinating, insightful, and impactful event for you, and we really hope you enjoy it. We have what we believe to be a truly incredible lineup of distinguished panelists for you from India, the United States of America, Rwanda, Mexico, and Switzerland, all of whom feature on the MKAI global list of amazing people. So, first of all, I'm honored and delighted to invite you to know our truly astounding first guest, who joins us today from India. He's been working in the domain of digital citizenship and internet maturity education for children and youth for more than a decade now. He's authored a book on that subject, designed a curriculum for schools, developed an online course, and founded an edtech startup, imature.in, which is India's only organization dedicated to digital citizenship education. He has an MSc in Advanced Telecommunication from the International Institute of Informational Technology. Please welcome Raghu Pandev, who will set the scene for us. Over to you, Raghu.
Thank you very much, Jerry, for that amazing introduction. Boosted my confidence. Thank you. So as you have given me this big responsibility of setting the scene, let me, attempt it. I do not promise anything good, but let me attempt setting the scene so that we can have an amazing discussions in the next more than 1 hour or 2 hours. First of all, okay. So first of all, I am truly appreciative of the MKAI team that you have come up with this brilliant idea of discussing digital citizenship in context of smart cities. Trust me, I've always believed both are fundamentally connected, very strongly connected, but I have never got a chance to discuss these two ideas at the same time in the same discussion. So yeah, thanks for this. The argument I am going to put on the table today is that there are two radically different ways we can visualize smart cities, we can plan smart cities. The first one is what we get to see around us is when cities are looked at as places where we have to install a lot of technology. And that technology is almost all about people and resource management, So we would want to put in smart cameras, smart electricity meters, smart water meters, smart parking lots, full of sensors here and there, smart payment cards with people which would automatically pay fees at all of these places, smart light poles which would double up as Wi-Fi antennas, smart billboards, smart irrigation grids, smart traffic lights, and you name it, smart garbage, all of these technologies which and obviously a huge data center backing all of this up and very expensive ERP software managing all those data. The underlying purpose of all of this approach of visualizing this smart city or planning this smart city, the underlying purpose, I believe, is controlling the behavior of people living in that city and shaping the behavior to the likes of the authorities. Okay, so when I feel so sorry if my words sound too harsh, but when you are designing a city with this kind of an approach or with this kind of a perspective, you are not very different from a scientist who is trying to shape the behavior of lab rats, right? They would design experiments that let's put some gadget here, let it beep, and let's see what the rats do. So sorry if it sounded too harsh, but I feel so. But the other approach can be very, very different from this one. And that is what I believe should be the one with which smart city should be designed. And that is considering city as a community of people. And, when you consider city as that, a community of people, then you prioritize the installation of different kind of technology. You will bring in technology, and that is what will make it smart. But then you prioritize a different set of technologies to be installed first, right? And they are, if in one phrase, if I sum it up, it is community empowerment technologies. So just to give a rough idea about it, making the community transport better and smart, making the community safe, making the community events even more, even more engaging, even more successful, making community spaces even more accessible and loved by the people in the city. And what I believe the most important of all, and where this concept of digital citizenship, which I'm working on, gets connected, is community participation technologies. So I believe, and I put forth this argument here, that the most important set of technologies which should be on the top of the deck of any smart city planning is community participation. And trust me, it sounded cool, but it is a very old set of technology. We have this thing since more than 25 years now on internet, wherein a big global community has been using, or a lot of communities have been using technologies like discussion forums, blogs, content sharing, networking. All of these technologies are now something that we take for granted. So actually, we are not thinking of spending billions of dollars on something, some new gadgets or some cool implementation or cool AI around it. We just have to repurpose the existing technology, which ensures that within a city, the community can voice their concerns, their suggestions, their requirements, their proposals to the other community members using these participative technologies. And this is where digital citizenship, in my opinion, this is where it gets connected to the concept of smart cities, because digital citizenship is basically all about having a meaningful and safe participation on the internet. So when I talk to digital citizenship about students, I tell them that digital citizenship skills are all about you guys making the best use of internet for your education and career and staying safe online. Apply the same logic to city dwellers. City dwellers making the best use of participative technologies for making their city life good, and at the same time being safe online. So I would quickly conclude by saying this, that if a city gets designed with the mind, with this concept of community participation technologies in mind, then and digital citizenship skills are given to the citizens, then we are going to actually see the success of smart cities, right? The objective that we have with smart cities is that bringing the quality of life up as high as possible. So we are going to have the right kind of technology and the people who are equipped with the right kind of skills to use those technologies. And once that happens, all the other things that I mentioned in the first visualization of gadgets coming into cities, once our high priority design is in place, community participation technologies are in place, then definitely managing the resources, managing the people will come, definitely. The only thing which is not happening today, and what I would love to see it happening, is the change in priority order of applying the technology in the smart city scene. So I hope I've been able to clarify what I wanted to say, and also wherein the concept of digital citizenship gets connected with the concept of smart cities. So that's how I look at it, and I would simply love to hear from so many diverse set of expertises that we have on the panel today. So I don't know if I exceeded or fell short of my time.
Raghu, thank you so much. No, I think you were perfectly on time, and there's so much in there to unpack tonight, isn't there, to get into, and about the meaningful and safe participation. But of course, then the 37% of people in the world that aren't digital, that aren't online, nearly 3 billion people, and that digital divide. So thank you for getting us started. And we'll add Ravi to our screens. There you are, your camera's back on. Let's add you as a spotlight. Jerry, do you want to say a word of gratitude to Raghu there since you started the conversation?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us here and for setting the scene so beautifully. I'm absolutely dumbstruck by the amount of food for thought contained in the last few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jerry. And Jason, we're going to launch into our first official panel now, which is why I've added Ravit on the screen as well. Tell us what this panel is, and then we'll dive in.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. I think we have two parts to the panel. So today we'll go for the first one at the moment, and it is about the rise and fall of the smart city. And we're going to cover about the challenges, the failings, etc. of the smart city. Some of that has been covered by Raghu. Mainly, we are trying to make that how we can learn from our past, how we can make them breathable spaces and create a better quality of life, as pointed out by Raghu, in order to create more innovation, sustainability, bring in more equality, and making it a better place to live in, rather than just turning the data into profits and making it more inclusive. Definitely. Yeah, I think this is what we want to hear, what technologies can do, what is their role, what are the various aspects of technologies, which Raghu has covered in a nutshell, but we want to see the details with the help of our panelists. And over to you, Jerry, to introduce Ravit.
We're proud and delighted to announce the very recent appointment of our next guest as AI ethics specialist advisor to our leadership team. She joins us from Pittsburgh, USA, and is a domain expert in AI ethics, specializing in helping companies and investors develop AI ethics strategies. She's VP of Responsible AI at Mission Control, a company developing a platform to automate responsible AI. She's also the Responsible AI advocate at Bria, where she builds and implements the company's responsible AI strategy. She consults, researches, writes. She's a renowned speaker about AI ethics. She's first and foremost a brilliant AI ethicist and an academic with, like so many on our leadership team, a philosophy background. She shares our values, is a passionate advocate of inclusivity and campaigner for the increased involvement of women in AI. She has a BSc in physics and chemistry and an MA in philosophy from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and a PhD from Berkeley, California. The driving force behind her career has always been to make AI responsible and to translate talk into action. Friends, please congratulate us and welcome the remarkable Dr. Ravit Bhutan.
Good to see you, Ravit.
Hi, that is a wonderful introduction, and I just want to say thank you. Sorry, Richard, I think I cut you off.
Not a problem, not a problem. What was the standout comment from what Raghu said? What moment made you kind of reflect and go into a tangent of thought, if there was one?
There were many. I really like the definition of digital citizenship.
Yeah.
I think it really captured the essence of the concept very well, that digital citizenship is about using digital means for people to participate. That really resonated with me.
Do you think there's multiple definitions to that in terms of being a digital citizen? Because cities, the way to interact with a city is becoming more digital, isn't it? Whether you're taking the bus or you're planning something. But does it go beyond that? Does this sort of citizenship rely on the digital aspect more and more, to actually be a citizen?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It does. It makes me think of this app that used to exist in 2013, and maybe it still exists today, and it's called Street Bump. So it was an app that was developed by the city of Boston because they had a problem of a lot of potholes. Those little things, holes in the road that when you drive over them makes you go, oh. So it's annoying. The city wanted to fix them. But the problem, they had many, I think like 27,000 or something holes that they were fixing per year. So they needed a way to identify where those potholes are. So the city of Boston developed this app, Street Bump. So when the app is on, and you drive over a hole, it registers in the app and it sends it to City Hall. And so they map all the potholes in the city. And so the plan was,
I'm
we will
smiling
know
because I
where-
know where you're going with this.
we
Hit
will
us with the
know where
punchline.
So we will know where the potholes are and we will come and fix them. And it sounds like a great idea for digital citizenship because, you know, when I go on the bus, it's like, I'm kind of like passive in a way, like I'm not communicating any of my needs, any of like my situation. I'm just like, hey, and like I'm paying. So by the way, I paid, you know? But something I really like behind this idea of, you know, Street Bump is it opens up a way for me to participate. To say, I have an issue here, there's a pothole, can you fix it? And if I have a smartphone, it makes it really streamlined. And so I think in theory, apps like this are a way, because when I think of participation, it's a dialogue. I need to have a way to articulate, to point out to some issues. And so it allows that. However, you know, another topic we want to talk about today is when it doesn't go well and the failures of that. And something that you said, Richard, that really resonated with me at the beginning is the difference between a city and a tech company. One difference is when you're thinking of a city, there's a wide range of people and we cannot ignore them, even if you're different from the people who build the apps. And so one thing they fortunately realized before launching this app is that the year was 2013. Not everyone had smartphones. Guess who did? Guess who didn't? And so, and especially in the elderly community, penetration of smartphones was sometimes as low as 16%. What does that mean? That we're not going to fix potholes in their neighborhoods? And so there's a risk when we introduce those technologies for digital participation to have our smart cities, because if we don't think things through, we will exacerbate the social inequalities that create barriers to the access to technology. So we will end up with potholes being fixed in the rich part of town and not in the poor part of town and not in the older part of town.
Yeah, that's the punchline, isn't it? If you're rich with a car and a phone, you'll get your potholes fixed, and everybody else, well, tough luck. We didn't think about you.
Yeah, I mean, but to their credit, they did realize this in advance. I mean, I didn't check what they did, but after, did they do it well or not? I do not know. But they did realize this, and they consulted with experts to think about how they can like overcome, you know, this faulty signal that they're gonna get. So there are ways, right? If we think things through.
Yes, Jaisal.
Yeah, Ravit, that's just because we have started this panel to understand the failings and the challenges around that. And you have talked more about the digital divide as well. I would like to understand really what's the role of these technologies such that it can create some meaning and create digital citizens who can contribute meaningfully to it and create a better smart city. How do we do that? Are there any cultural aspects to be considered as well? We can,
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated question because how do we get over the digital divide? I don't know. I don't have an answer to this. But I do want to say something about another way of participation. Because one way to participate is to say, I'm going to install this app on my phone and I'm going to turn it on so that it would report the potholes. That is a way for me to participate. But another way for me to participate is to be a part of that team that designs that phone and say, actually, a lot of my neighbors are old. They don't have smartphones. And so I think when we're thinking of participation of citizens in the design of the smart city, they have a really pivotal role in bringing into awareness all of those issues to make sure that when we develop things like Street Bump, the people who develop it are aware of the issues, because they might not know, because probably they're not a very diverse group. And so they, I think, the developers of those apps, the City Hall, they have the responsibility of opening up those ways of communication, but then the citizens have the responsibility of engaging. And that's how they can, that's another way of meaningfully engaging. And it might not be on an app. I might have to go to a City Hall meeting. I don't know what exactly it would entail, but I would need to do that to do my part to make sure that what needs to be taken into account is seen.
Raghu, you live in a fascinating country that's got incredible wealth, more millionaires, I think, than any other country, more than the US anyway, which is remarkable. But there is that stark contrast, and perhaps, you know, that is just the size of the country that we're referring to, you know, that size of the continent. What have been some of the lessons do you think have been picked up locally around digital inclusion?
I mean, I live in a land of contradictions, you know, but I mean, if that's the pessimistic way of looking at it, the optimistic way is to look at it as a land of coexistence also. So seemingly so diverse kind of people, and you can call them life forms, you know, you sometimes can't even put them in the category of people. We have so much of diversity here, but we coexist here. And talking about inclusion, what I have seen, what has worked is an array of approaches going all at once, you know. So you have to look at people who are not into the education system right now. You have to look at people who are not into a structured financial system right now. So, you know, what I look at it is like a shared responsibility among so many organizations. So maybe there is government working at digital inclusion and bridging the digital divide. Also, there is an NGO working towards it. Also, there is a for-profit company bringing its product towards it. Also, there are individual experts going around and spreading awareness or things like that. So it sounds chaotic. It sounds unstructured. It sounds like where will be set the accountability. But that is what works here in India. And almost 1 billion people now have a phone. Out of that, I'm not having the right statistics, but more than 50% of that is smartphone connectivity. And that has happened because a lot of local language apps were designed. And the other thing that has worked for the elderly community, majority of the apps with the local language thing, they have brought in the youngsters. But how the elderly came in, they joined in with the networking apps like the WhatsApp. And what pulled them in was not the user friendliness of the app, or not that they had a use case in mind. It's called network effect. So just because every other person in the family, the young and the middle-aged, was on WhatsApp discussing something, you know, sharing jokes, sharing grief, whatever, the elderly community joined in. Their entry point was WhatsApp. So as you can see to the list of things I mentioned, there's another thing, network effect, bridging, working to bridge the digital divide in this such a diverse country here. So, you know, let all the horses run and let's see who wins the race is the strategy which is going on here. I don't know, did it make sense? I don't know.
It's an interesting perspective, and I'm glad you brought it up. Jaisal, what do you want to come to next?
I think I would like to ask Ravit, you know, regarding two aspects. First thing is, in context to what even Raghu mentioned, is about different generations starting to use the digital technologies. But in context to that, why should citizens really participate in building these smart cities? And is there an aspect of the cultural aspect which brings in differences, hurdles, or challenges to build smart cities as well, Ravit? We would like to know this because it's very important, especially even I come from India, so definitely there's so much of cultural aspect. So we would really want to understand how it impacts the building of smart cities.
Yeah, this is a great question. So as I understand it, the question is, why should citizens do this? Why should they engage? And to me, it's a subcategory of the question of why should citizens participate in civil life generally? Why should I vote? And the answer to this question, I think, is very culturally sensitive because each country, I think, has its own ethos and let's say philosophy behind how we see the regime. What is the job of the government? Why do we want them? How are they supposed to help us? These are questions that deeply depend on, how you conceptualize the role of the state. And I think that's why ways to motivate citizens to participate are going to vary by culture. So, there's a stereotype that for Europeans, it's really important to have regulation, for example, but in the US, there's pushback against that, right? Because they want to have individual freedoms and things like that. So if you're thinking, how do we convince people? We would appeal to their values. If what matters to you is regulation, then you want regulation to be good, yeah, then you need to participate, right? If you want your individual freedoms preserved, okay, tell us which ones. So I think it's deeply culturally sensitive, this question. And I can say for me, from my cultural context, so I'm Israeli. I guess I have been living in the US for almost 10 years now, but for me, the way that I am thinking of the role of the state's job is to take care of me. They need to help me, especially when I am weak, when I'm sick, when I don't have money. So for me, why should I participate in designing digital citizenship, in designing, anything in the city, including smart aspects of it? Because I also have a role in protecting those who are not in a position to protect themselves, so that the state could do its job better of protecting them. And then I also want to advocate for my own needs, because I'm going to be influenced by whatever app City Hall comes up with. So that's the answer from me. And I'm assuming the answer will be different from, for people with other backgrounds and other perceptions of what the role of the state or city is.
A scenario in that, Ravi, what if we were over in a country that didn't have a policy yet on facial recognition in its urban areas, and they called you in and said, Ravi, what should we do? How do we get citizen participation in this decision? Do we or do we not use facial recognition linked to the cameras in the city, CCTV, body cams, whatever? A public vote. I mean, what would you feed back to them? I know you're getting all the difficult questions. I know you'll tell me that afterwards, but help me with this one. What would we say to them?
I think it starts with thinking not necessarily about the means through which they will express their opinion. If it's a survey, if it's a vote, that is a question to decide on. But first, I think the question is, how do we educate them? Because whatever way they have to express what they think, it's better that they think things through first. And so for me, that's where the thought process starts, because a lot of them may not know what facial recognition is or why it might be dangerous. So it would have to start with an educational effort. And specifically, in my experience, it's been helpful to emphasize the potential good and potential bad that thing could do, whatever technology it is. And like, for example, I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago, and I think they were traveling through an airport with a family member who was wearing some kind of a face covering, and because she was Muslim, and did not identify her. And when you hear of that personal experience, I wasn't talking to that woman, just a family member who was traveling with her, but I could hear the pain, and I get it. And I think making very vivid the potential different kinds of risks that come with that technology, both helps explain what the technology is in a non-technical way, and why people should care about it and do like whatever action. So to me, when I think, how do I get people in? How do I consider their, I'm thinking more, how do I educate them? And then how do I connect? This is again a culturally sensitive thing, but what are the means of communication in that society? For example, I lived in California. In California, they do a vote every 2 years on various bills, and that's how they decide. So if I were to live in California, I think that would be a great way to go. But I'm also Israeli, right? So have that context. In Israel, it's really common to do protests when you don't like something that the government or city, or city hall is doing. So if I were in an Israeli context, I would say, get awareness around this. Let's get people on the streets, right? But like in other countries or other regions, probably different strategies would make sense.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that challenging question. And then we might end up with herd mentality, couldn't we? And biases in the education and so on, of the outcomes that people want. And I thought it'd be a good example because, of course, it can keep us safe and it can create a dystopian city and it can make mistakes and convict the wrong people and blah, 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 Minority Reports. And Raghu, we're 1 minute on the clock, but do you want to comment on that? Or do you want us to, do you want to talk about something else?
Maybe I just comment on this question from Jaisal, that why in the first place people should participate. If I can quickly comment from the perspective of my country. We are a resource-starved country, 1.4 billion people, much less money per person to be spent for quality of life. So just one saying, which is in Hindi, and I'm going to translate it to you. The reason why we should participate either through the old-fashioned technology or the old-fashioned ways or the digital technologies is, if a baby doesn't cry, even the mother won't feed her. So give feedback, give your demands to the government, give your demands to the authorities. Otherwise, you won't get the share of resources which is required for your even basic survival in countries which are currently developing and parts of the country which are underdeveloped right now. So that's the reason people should participate in such countries. See, maybe I'm just adding to the list which Ravid just told us, that there are various reasons why people should participate in so many other places. That's just one more reason.
Thank you so much. I just brought Animesh on the screen to share a couple of thoughts, but Harold, you got your hand up. If you can say something in about 30 seconds, that'd be ace. If you want longer, then, and good seeing you, by the way. How are you? Hashim, you put your hand up on purpose.
Oh, pretty good. What about yourself?
Really well. So good seeing you. Just give us a soundbite here because we're going to keep to time, okay?
Yeah. Yesterday, my organization filed public comments in response to the Department of Education's notice relating to COVID. And we introduced something called the Tuskegee effect in opposition to the Department of Education. The point is that the research that we conducted took over 10 or 20 years, and it wasn't subjected to confirmation bias. And what I'll do is I'll post a copy of the opposition in the chat, and the viewers can write their own opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That would be fantastic. I really look forward to seeing that. Thank you, Harold. And as I say, great seeing you. And Imesh, you've been writing on this. Share a couple of gems that you've had from a couple of weeks of reflecting on this topic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And good evening, everyone. And good afternoon, wherever people are joining in from. And it is so good and enriching to hear and participate in this with our expert today on this very important topic of going beyond smart cities. And to the discussion, I post this forum as well. MKAI has published a blog article on the same topic of going beyond smart cities, which provides a critique to the current smart cities model and proposing to go beyond just operations in the name of smart cities to develop more citizen-centric urban settings. which are more inclusive towards its citizens and the people who are living in these particular settings. The link to the article I'll be sharing in the chat box, and we invite everyone to have a read at it and engage in the interesting conversation in the comment section. And we would love to see you all there and hear your opinions on it. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And we'll account for that in the chat. A great article. I really enjoyed mostly reading it and very slightly contributing to it. Vibhab, how are you?
Hi, Richard. Hi, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
It looked smooth that you came on the screen, but actually I was floundering around trying to find you for about a minute on the list like this, and it just found you in time. And you're looking awesome in your t-shirt.
Thank you. Right. So should I do the community update? Or do you,
go for it. It's all yours, my man.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Vibhav. I serve as a voluntary head of community at MKAI. I'm here to tell you about the MKAI WhatsApp group. Just how this discussion is going, and like Ravit highlighted that it's a question of potential good versus potential bad. The MKAI group, and we'll assess that only when we have a discussion, or we understand, and we have a conversation rather, and we understand what are the pros and cons of the issue that we're discussing. In that same vein, the MKAI WhatsApp group, and this has been around now for about over 2 years, is your space. It's meant for everyone who's here. Everyone who's here is thinking about this topic, is curious about AI, is probably curious about Web3, about metaverse, about ethical AI, all aspects that MKAI touches. And the WhatsApp group is for you to take the conversation forward. A couple of things. We do not claim that we have all the answers, but we do claim to take forward the dialogue, and which is why it's important for you to join the group so that you can participate in the conversation. The second point, we don't know when we talk about ethical AI, the question is really who's missing from the room. We don't know if we will have everyone in the room, but what we do want to make sure at MKAI is that whoever is present in the room is heard and their views are put forth. So to discover AI, Web3, metaverse, to discover yourself, to discover your passion for AI. And I say this with some level of this thing because we've seen how MKAI champions or MKAI community members have grown. Join us on the WhatsApp group.
My new line of selling t-shirts is going very well. Apart from that, I forgot mine. But yeah, you know my email, richard@fosterfletcher.com. Just send me a one-liner and say, Richard, find me a t-shirt. And we've got white ones on the way, blue ones have gone out. They're really nice quality, actually, aren't they, Vibhab? And
they're brilliant.
I think to come here, wish I was wearing mine, and have these forums together and wear our t-shirts is something quite special, isn't it? It brings us together. Sure. Thanks so much for sharing that, Vibhab. Sure. That's really great. You're going to pop the link on the chat, or if I missed it.
I'll just put it in.
Great, yeah, cool. Thank you so much. I want to share one quick update from my side as well. That's obviously everybody knows that we're really fascinated by AI ethics and how we can get involved. And the recent addition to our team of Ravit is a wonderful supplement to that as well. The thing that we want to get known for particularly is the diversity of thought on AI. There are many experts in our domain, and we're very grateful and glad they're around, and they give us that depth of expertise. But like our recent LinkedIn post said, AI is not food and AI is not drugs. Expertise, research, and testing are not enough. You need the breadth. You must have the diversity of thought. So we've been amassing and bringing together a collective of people, not experts, right, but people who want to get involved and contribute. And there's many ways that we can do this. And it all starts by going to this page here that I'm putting in the chat and just filling in that form. It's all optional, so fill in the things that you want to fill in. And that will tell us that you want to get involved in this process to make AI fairer and more representative and to join us to make this whole thing work more effectively for everyone that it's meant to serve, not just a few. So go ahead to that website if you're not already involved. We will love to see you there. Do you need a hand with the WhatsApp link, Vibhav? Because no, you've done it. Perfect. Okay, not that I know any more than you do. Thanks for the updates, team. Ravi and Raghu, you're going to stick with us. We talk about the Graham Norton approach that we have to AI forums, where you stay on the couch. So speak up, chip in, don't stay quiet, okay? But promise me you both won't stay quiet. I want to hear it.
I won't stay quiet.
Ravid?
I shall not stay quiet.
Excellent. That's why you're here, and we'll hear from others as well, of course, who will chip in. But we're going to start our second panel, the one we want to spend a little bit more time on as well, actually. So Jaisal, please, if you would set the scene for us.
Absolutely. So moving on to our next panel, we are going to be talking about the digital participation around the world and how can we do better. We have been talking now on the first panel as to the challenges and why people should participate, but now we will be talking about use cases and how to bring in the global inclusion with the various panelists and the various aspects around it, that we are not going to be just using the noun smart, but create a human connection and bring in digital inclusion and make it more global. So over to you, Jerry, for introducing our next panelist.
Thanks, Jaisal. Our next guest joins us from Rwanda, where she's the Smart Cities Project Director at the Ministry of ICT and Innovation and President and co-founder at Shenge Children Organization, an organization that takes care of children with disabilities from vulnerable families. She's also a Young African Leaders Initiative alumni and a World Economic Forum Global Shaper for Kigali Hub. She holds a bachelor's degree in business studies from Cardiff Metropolitan University and an MBA from the University of South Wales. She's a young project management professional passionate about ICT and its power to change and improve lives, and has over 7 years experience in the ICT sector in Rwanda. She's enthusiastic about making change, youth empowerment, and using her influence to impact her community. Please welcome Alice Higiro.
Alice, how are you?
I'm doing great, Richard. Thank you. Thanks, Jerry, for the introduction.
So here's how it usually goes. Jaisal's ready to ask you a question. I get super excited about something I've just thought of, jump in really quick and can't wait to ask it. But I'm going to seal my lips and ask Jaisal to open with a question.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for giving that time, but we'll try to make some time for your question, definitely. So I think, thank you, Alice, for joining us on the panel discussion. And as per our second panel, we would like to understand from you, what is exactly meant when we talk about digital inclusion? And are there really any practical approaches for citizen involvement and engagement when we talk about digital economy, really? Because there may be some theoretical approaches, but are there really practical approaches to make it happen?
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm quite excited to be joining. This is my first time to join the MKAI session. So thanks for having me. Digital inclusion. I like what Raghu said earlier when he bridged or brought a linkage between the digital world and digital inclusion and smart cities. And so I'll just quickly sort of reiterate what he said. So for me, in the global perspective, digital inclusion is where everyone is able to participate or engage in the digital society and enjoying the benefits that the internet has to provide. And I was just reading earlier a report by the ITU saying that now at the moment, over 66% of the world is online or at least has access to internet, which leaves another 34%, I believe, who are still offline. And I can't imagine what that's like in today's world, right? With, in the face of COVID and so on. So now that's digital inclusion. But when I think of it in the aspect of smart cities, again, smart cities, the purpose of smart cities is to improve the quality of life. Quality for me is what I think about, right? even with the 66% that we say are online, what's the quality of their access to digital technologies? And so in that sense, it's bringing together technology, innovation, data to really try and improve the life of a citizen or the public in general. And when we talk about digital inclusion as well, I don't know how much time I have for this, but I just wanted to quickly touch on the key pillars that I think of when we talk about digital inclusion, or at least in Rwanda that we bank on. So one is digital skills. Do people have the right skills to actually use these digital technologies, the benefits that technology or the digital world bring? I was reading again something earlier that was saying that at the moment, majority of the jobs require to have a certain element of having digital skills, and that by 2025, 90% of our jobs will require a digital element in them. And so I think about, for example, the 34 people who are still offline. What does that mean for them? So digital skills. Secondly, access to both devices and also internet, and that also brings in digital infrastructures. There are countries that still have very minimal or very small scale digital infrastructures. And so that automatically hinders people from participating in the digital economy. And then do people have access to devices as well? So smartphone penetration is quite low. I would say this maybe mostly in the developing world, smartphone penetration is still really, really low. And this also impedes people's participation in the digital economy. Thirdly, I would say, so I said digital skills, I said access, and then also there's affordability of both the devices and the internet itself, and then content and applications. We were talking about it here in Rwanda, saying, for example, if you produce content that's in the English language and not in the local language, majority of our people, who actually over 80% who live in rural areas and probably do not speak the language, will not be able to consume the whatever you've put out there. And so we have to look at all these 4 levers, and now bringing them all together is also cybersecurity. Do people feel safe enough? Do they feel confident to use these digital technologies? And so you can't talk about digital inclusion without talking about the safety of the people online, how they feel online. Now, maybe just lastly, Jay, so you asked how do people participate and also in citizen involvement in the digital economy. And I like what was discussed earlier. There's participation on the side of identifying challenges that need to be solved, for example. There's participation on the side of also producing these technologies. And so some practical ways that we have found is creating co-creation spaces where, for example, if we say we're going to tackle smart parking, we've done that in Rwanda, and that's why I'm just highlighting it quickly, is we said, okay, we've seen that parking is a problem. This is how we think we can solve it. But what do the citizens think? They have a different perspective. They have maybe even newer ideas than we have. And so we all get in the same room, citizens, the government, the private companies, the academia, and everyone puts together thoughts, and we crowdsource the challenges, the problem, we expand on the problem, but also co-design the solution. Thank you.
Alice, how much has that happened because of the certain personalities of the people involved? As in, how unique is that extraordinary process? Or are you seeing it replicated in other cities and other countries?
So I know that it's in a few countries. This is happening under the framework that we are calling the Policy Lab, where we basically experiment. I think in the UK you've done that. And
one of your colleagues was talking about it yesterday to me as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great. So you know a bit about that. So yeah. This is experimenting on the policy before we actually enact it, and including the citizens in designing these policies, because these policies are for the people, right? And so this is relatively new. We started on this last year. We did a pilot on waste management where we wanted to introduce waste segregation, but we have a way we understand it, but we needed to understand if the public understands waste segregation, the importance of it. And so we did a survey with 15,000 households in the city of Kigali. And surprisingly, we found that 50% of the people were already aware of, and wanted to segregate their waste, but they didn't have the means to. And so we are now using this more and more in all our projects, in all our policy development. And I know that it's a rising topic across the world.
Thank you so much. And of course, the technology adoption, I mean, it's so rapid, isn't it, in a place like Rwanda, you know, in terms of every month, every year, you've got a very different landscape of accessibility that you factor in. Jaisal.
Yeah. I think, Alice, you wonderfully mentioned about the aspects in order to bring the global inclusion, a lot of things which people don't consider when it comes to the practical approach and the content, like the local language aspect. I really liked that. So in terms of that, and we have been talking about some use cases, but I would like you to talk through some failures and some successes, some kind of use cases which highlights even the opportunities, the risks, the ethical perspectives, etc. Anything that covers the digital participation and the lack of it. Any examples that come right to your mind?
So in terms of successes, I can think of maybe I'll just highlight 2 to 3 use cases that we've had in Rwanda. For example, for digital participation, we have something that our e-government portal, which is called Irembo. Irembo means in English gateway. And this is where we provide government services to the citizens. And this has been a major success in a way that, especially during the lockdowns, we saw the uptake multiply. I don't know the percentages, but I know that the transactions multiplied because people were able to apply for example, a death certificate, the birth certificate, or different services, including, you know, identification, immigration, safety, and so on. And this has been quite a successful one. We have over 114 services that are offered on this. The aim of this, when we were establishing it, was to reduce the number of trips that people have to make, citizens have to make to go to the offices, local authority offices, where they find that the local authority person is in a meeting for 2 hours, and now I have to queue up for 2 hours, and then by the time he comes out, there is a line of 100 people. So not only am I losing time, I've lost my transport money that I spent coming here, but I also had to take time off work and so on. So this has been an immense positive case for us that we've witnessed, and now the uptake and the adoption was multiplied by the COVID-19, which showed people the importance of really being online. Another one I'll mention is Zipline, another major success factor that has also scaled up to other countries, both in Africa and in the US. Zipline uses drones to deliver blood to remote areas. Now, Rwanda is a very hilly country. We have very difficult terrain. And so, for example, blood transfer to remote areas could have taken between 4 hours and 4 days or so on. It's now taking less than 45 minutes to deliver blood to that area. And so you can imagine that how many lives are being saved, how many lives are being preserved and saved. And so Zipline we were the first country to use drones for commercial purposes, and also experiment on policy that allowed for that to happen. So that's another use case. And the last one I'll talk about is Connect Rwanda. So we realize, you know, as I talked about, devices are key to this, everything we're talking about here. If people don't have the devices, then whatever else we're doing is really useless. And so with this notice, with the low smartphone penetration in the country, we embarked on this new campaign that's called Connect Rwanda, where we invited on social media the public to contribute, basically to pledge to give funds to underprivileged homes and households that could not afford a smartphone. And so far we've been able to, people pledged, and we've been able to distribute over 26,000 phones. That's 26,000 households that now have at least one smartphone. And so these are some positive use cases that have increased, that are increasing smartphone penetration, and people are seeing I think Richard, you mentioned, or someone mentioned earlier, how it's not like one person in the neighborhood having a smartphone also gives service to the other 10 neighbors that he has, right, who want to apply for that Irembo service that I mentioned earlier. And a few failures, I would say, maybe not failures, but challenges that we've witnessed for ourselves are mostly to do with budget. All of this stuff that we're talking about requires investments, right? And so, you know, for some of us some countries that don't have, for example, natural resources where we are getting heavy revenues from, investment is a big challenge, where now we have different competing government priorities. And so, you know, between deploying smartphones and saving lives and vaccine deployment, obviously you know where the focus is going to be. So that has been a major challenge. Low talent, tech talent that does on both sides, that produces the content, the technologies, products that we need, but also that the low digital skills is still a challenge here in Rwanda, or even in the region. I would say smartphone penetration is still quite really low. And these are market failures, obviously, that affect the rate at which we are transforming digitally our economies. Some opportunities I see, increasing citizen satisfaction. We've seen that majorly through our platform, the e-government portal that I mentioned. And there is still room for growth. There is still room for digitizing other services. And I read some GSMA report that was saying that we have over 2 billion people that remain unbanked. But on the continent of Africa, for example, we've seen mobile money revolutionize the financial sector. We have so many people that earn. For example, in Rwanda, a big chunk of our economy is the informal sector, is made up of the informal sector. These are people who otherwise would not have been banked, would not have had access to a brick and mortar bank. But now with mobile money, just being able to work with their mobile wallet, it has changed their transaction and business style. And for women in some economies, women are unsafe when they hold cash. You know, the husband will beat them up because they made some money and take it, go get drunk on it. But now they're able to keep their money in a secure place and also invest in other businesses, create a credit score for themselves as well. So these are some opportunities that are still there. I could talk about a lot more, but I know that I'm short for time, so I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Alice.
Yeah, thanks, Jez. It's eye-opening. I mean, we were interviewing one country that I won't name and asking about smartphone for use in agriculture, and the farmers, a majority of which are female, because the men typically are working over in a different country, and the women farmers don't have smartphones because their husbands don't allow them to, because it allows them to have more control over them. So it's quite eye-opening, isn't it, the way these things operate, and the example you just gave. Jerry, I've put Anna on screen. Could you do me the great honor of introducing our wonderful next participant?
I'd love to. She's from Mexico, and last time we spoke to Paul Quasar, who I think is still in the audience, he's also from this very, very tiny place called Mexico. So I imagine you guys can arrange to have a coffee together or something later or tomorrow. You're probably in very close proximity. Our next panelist is an electrical engineer with a career she's an electrical engineer with a career trajectory in the telecommunications sector. She's currently working as an infrastructure consultant at AT&T and starting a business in the digital services sector, using AI to grant services to small businesses in the supply chain industry. She's worked on software projects in Mexico, Ecuador, and Beijing, and is a telecommunications engineering graduate of Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. Please enjoy and welcome Ana Ramirez, who is on mute.
I'm so sorry. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and I'm really pleased to be. I'm honored to be among all these great panelists, and also to be included and to give some perspective of what I've learned through all my career. I think it isn't all that we can learn about technologies. But I also like to participate and give my opinion, give some insights about how is the state of the art of technology and across the countries in terms of use of technology, and how can people participate around these new innovations. I think it's depending on where you are, depending on what you are doing, is how can we is the answer to the how can we include more people to make it more useful, inclusive, and also to innovate, I think, technology. So Raghu said earlier that he believes that when we really make participation of people, of like allow them knowledge of how to use these technologies and put some insights of how do they use them, we can increase the awareness of making places more smarter. I think that will be the answer, because sometimes in some places you don't need at all the use of technology. You actually want to disconnect, unplug from technology. You just want to have a breath. But in other parts of the region or other parts of the city or outside of the city, there is a need of technology, because you need to provide children education, because there is more practical uses of technology on like less human use and more machine use. So how to identify that is just making more people like visibility around this and knowledge. And I think participating on campaigns, letting other, like both men and women should participate, because still there are gaps around the gender and inequality too. So I see that that there should be, I think, I would propose to be more, to open more places for people to have these smart conversations and allow them to try new ways of using devices, or participation on opinions, not just, you know, just well, here in Mexico we have like a cultural tradition or something like mocking around, joking about around things that happen in the country. So I think a smarter way would be like allowing people to say, oh, okay, I'm come from outskirts of Mexico City, and I see here there are a lot of robbery, and we could participate as a community and, you know, take care of all of our community if we are concerned by, you know, sending a small SMS between everyone to be aware that everyone of the community is safe, and if something happens, then report to the police, like more closeness in that way, in a meaningful way, I think. And also, I think there is also lack of education and lack of skills in some parts of the country, and also the accessibility to the technologies, because sometimes some people cannot afford these technologies, so they don't, they are not even interested on learning how to use it. So the more you can share the knowledge, maybe the principal knowledge around how to use any device, like probably a really old smartphone, and maybe you can let other people interact with it, then we can bring closer to people that really need it, I think. Yeah, I don't know if it is enough or if I felt too short, but I feel like all this whole talk brings like the whole speakers have been really really bringing all the ideas together, and I just feel like I just want to summarize all of what they have said before.
Paul, I've just put you on screen. Does that resonate, or I mean, what are your perspectives?
Well, one of the major issues that I saw in Mexico, and I know is a global issue, is opportunities for corruption to seep into projects. And, you know, there are, you know, for example, you know, building projects or highway projects have a massive amount of infiltration of corruption. And the simple use of distributed ledger technology eliminates that opportunity for corruption to seep in because of its transparency financially. And it's also has a significant amount of security, so funds can't be siphoned off. There was a wastewater project in Sayulita that was a perfect example of how corruption seeped in. I mean, there was a certain amount of money that was raised and allocated for the project. And by the time the project was being implemented, less than half of those funds were available to actually build out the wastewater plant. So in trying to tie together, contractors and government officials, just the use of distributed ledger technology resolves the potential for that corruption. So that was my major issue that we had in that I experienced in Mexico, and we even raised a significant amount of funds for the wastewater plant from nonprofit fundraising, because the health of the community, both at a individual level, because the quality of water had degraded significantly because of all the things that were happening to the water, from agriculture to other kinds of pollutants, even coming from commercial construction firms that were building highways. They didn't use any type of pollution detention types of mechanisms because they didn't care. It didn't matter. And just recently, colleagues that were there, the media that was recording the intensity of storms that's occurring on the west coast of Mexico, the media vehicles ended up getting washed into the ocean. So now they have full-size cars literally washing into the ocean because the funds for a bridge never made it to project level. They got diluted out through their existing processes. So that's one example of where just distributed ledger technology from a financial transaction standpoint, if that was implemented, you can eliminate a significant amount. And that's not, stakeholder related. That's just the bridge between government and the projects. But it makes those financial transactions visible and transparent to the community, so they know that the corruption isn't occurring.
Yes. Boy, thank you so much for adding that. I spoke to a country just yesterday who said, Richard, when it comes to subsidies, we have a lot of middlemen. And it's to your point. We'll hop over to Errol. Paul, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wow, thank you, Richard. Had to find my mute button there quickly. Just two quick points. Thank you for the most fascinating discussions. The first one is a little bit of philosophical pushback from me, which is most of my colleagues don't think of me as philosophical, nor do I. But I'm debating with myself, is the better approach to bring beneficial technologies to the market, to citizens in this case, waiting for perfection? And I'm thinking obviously of ethics and inclusivity and the important dimensions we've been debating, or the Microsoft approach, which is Windows was taken to market long before it even worked, but they started developing, and it was the good enough approach. The good enough philosophy went to market, and eventually, only very recently, have they actually got a stable version of Windows. So that's one approach. And my downside of waiting and debating is that even this morning, here in Cardiff, I was with some good folk from Somaliland and South Africa talking about education, training, and mentorship programs. And they were saying, we have to do it today. We can't wait 2 years and 10 years to start bringing the benefits forward. Even if it's skewed to one section or another, it will help us identify who's being left behind, and we'll get them to catch up. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is. My second and last point is interesting based on some of the things that were said, that here in the UK, central government has been digitizing online for a very long time. I don't know if they were one of the first. I think they were. And not unsurprisingly, they started with taxation and revenue for companies and individuals over 10 years ago. Nonetheless, with that long track record and experience, there's such a long way still to go. Specifically at a city level, we're very disconnected. Cities data is generally, if it even exists in manageable form, not linked to regional government and central government. Most central government departments, one or two exceptions, are not linked down the channel either. So you may go to city councils and there's still thousands of PDF forms that you have to download and physically do something with, not yet digitized. So there's still a long way to go. And so with both of my points, the inclusivity, good enough, perfection debate, and in the UK experience, what comes to mind is Rome was not built in a day. I don't think we should beat ourselves up too much, but keep the pressure up, keep going forward, and we will find, like a pebble in a pond, that the benefits do circulate and radiate outwards.
As long as we watch out for those biases on the way as we rush things through, we don't need a break, move fast and break things. But it's really good. It reminds me of General Patton, you know, a good plan now is better than a perfect plan next week, or whatever he said. Thanks for contributing, Errol. Let's try and get back on time rather than me keep adding people who wave.
Absolutely, Richard.
Sorry, Jason. You know, I get excited.
Yes, back to you, Jerry, to introduce Yining.
Last but not least, our final panelist joins us from Switzerland, where she works as Junior Communications Officer at the International Telecommunications Union. She supports their activities related to IoT and smart cities in the ITUT Study Group 20, which is concerned with Internet of Things, smart cities and communities, and smart sustainable cities. Prior to this role, she worked as an engineer in the China Academy of Information and Communications Technology. She has a bachelor's degree in both accounting and philosophy from Renmin University of China and a master's in management from Bristol, UK. Please welcome Yining Zhao.
Thank you, Jerry, for your kind introduction, and thank you, MKAI, for having me here to join this excellent panel discussion.
Welcome, Yining.
With you, Jason, otherwise I'll get excited again.
Absolutely, we need to keep in time. You know, I'm the moderator. I'm the bad cop here. Coming back to Yining, we have been talking a lot about challenges. Raghu has added points of challenges. Ravit has added, Alice has added a whole list about the challenges. Do you think there are any additional challenges in the adoption of digital technologies in smart cities? And how can the international standards and guidelines really help in the adoption of them?
Yes, our excellent panelist has mentioned almost all of the challenges, I think. And I'm working in the standardization bureau in the ITU. And from our experience, maybe I can add one more challenge, which is the interoperability. This is the main barrier that preventing cities from scaling up and fully realizing the benefits of many digital solutions in the digital transformation of cities. This is because that many IoT systems and platforms today are developed in isolation, which directly impact their ability to exchange information, manage data, and adopt scalable IoT solutions. And this is particularly not good to city functions that rely on having access to all forms of information to be effective. So regarding these challenges and the other concerns, the international organizations such as the ITU is at the forefront of the digital transformation, supporting the adoption of the emerging technologies through the development of international standards. So as you may know, the International Telecommunication is a specialized agency of the United Nations responsible for all matters related to information and communication technologies. Within the ITU, the Study Group 20 is responsible for studies on IoT, its applications, and smart cities and communities. So ITUT Study Group 20 develops standards related to big data, digital services in cities to help cities accelerate their digital transformations. And a standards series I would like to highlight is the ITU-T Y.4900 series. This standard series provide a detailed list of key performance indicator related to the use of ICT and the corresponding impacts on cities and communities. For example, the recommendation ITU-T Y.4903, the key performance indicator for smart sustainable cities to assess the achievement of sustainable development goals, is an essential standard helping cities around the world with the adoption of digital technologies. And other ITU standards such as the recommendation ITU-T Y.4200, this series set the requirements for the interoperabilities of smart city platforms. So the international standards such as this, we think can help cities overcome the inherent challenges associated with the fast-paced development of technologies by both raising awareness and also providing concrete guidance.
Thanks, Yaning. I think it's really interesting to know that there are guidelines and standards available. And later, when you have the time, if you just put in all those numbers, because all the numbers may not be remembered by our audience, for the benefit of everybody, if you just post them on the chat later, it would be really, really useful. And coming back to talking about standards, etc., looking ahead, I think in the future, because we are talking about the present and the future both in this forum, how can we ensure that the future of digital technology will be really inclusive, fair, and equitable, and promote more people-centered or human-centered smart cities?
Thank you for the question. So first of all, the standards, I will put the number and the link to the chat after this, and all the ITU standards are free to all. So back to this question, it's very important that we ensure that the smart cities we build is smart for all. This means being digitally inclusive and accessible for all people, and empower everyone through ICTs, regardless their gender, age, ability, or the context of use. So to ensure that smart cities are not introducing technologies for technology's sake, cities actually have international standards to support them. Standards can set overreaching frameworks, define objectives and priorities, and also provide specific guidelines for how to implement these digital technologies. And they can also provide a way to measure and improve performance to ensure that cities are tackling the right problems and deliver values. In terms of the accessibility we talked before, there are such standards such as the ITU-T Y.4204, accessibility requirements for the Internet of Things applications and services, and another recommendation which is focused on the accessibility requirements for smart public transport services and for other areas. So this kind of standards help set best practices for ensuring the accessible ICTs. And in spite of the standards, I would like to mention another United Nations initiative, the United for Smart Sustainable Initiative, the U4SSC. It is a United Nations global initiative that provides an international platform for information exchange and partnership building to guide cities and communities in achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the UN SDGs. This initiative is coordinated by the ITU, UNECE, and UN Habitat, and supported by other 14 UN bodies. It helps support the development of institutional policies and strategies that encourage digital technologies to facilitate digital transformation and ease the transition to smart, sustainable cities. So with the growing need for the digital technologies to be more accessible and inclusive, the U4SSC initiative has established a new thematic group recently. It is on the enabling people-centered cities through digital transformation. And within this new thematic group, there is a working Working Party 2 specifically focus on the policy benchmark to make cities people-centered in their digital transformation process. It is working on to establishing a strategic policy framework underpinning the various guidelines for ethical, secure, and smart utilization of data and information and communication technologies for digital transformation and a carbon neutral future for all. And in addition, ITU is also, together with other UN bodies, developed a toolkit on digital transformation for people-oriented cities and communities. This toolkit includes the international standards and guidance and the latest research and projections, as well as the cutting-edge reports on various timely topics relevant to the digital transformation of cities and communities, including the accessibility and inclusiveness. And there is also an ongoing webinars developed by ITU together with other organizations and UN agencies. It aims to provide a space to explore and investigate the role of digital transformation in driving innovation, sustainable growth, and inclusion for cities. So I think we can all agree that making cities smart, sustainable, and people-centered is an evolving and ongoing process. There are many ongoing work in ITU. I would like to invite you to check out the toolkit I mentioned, the toolkit on the digital transformation for people-oriented cities. And you can also sign up for the webinars series in this topic. We have all the recordings for the previous webinars. And I would like to also invite you to participate in the activity of the UN initiative, the UFA SSC thematic group, to together with us develop the action plans, technical specifications, case study guidelines, and also offer policy guidance for cities to become smarter, more sustainable, while accelerating their digital transformation. And I will post the link of these initiatives in the chat box.
Thank you so much, Yining. I think all this information is quite useful, and some of the links people might not be aware of. So this brings in, what we wanted from this forum is to get an interest in order to bring more inclusion from people and show an interest in building smart cities. So thank you for doing that. And moving on to audience questions, we have one of the questions. Ravit, to start with you, there is a question from Brent, and it is: the future is lifelong learning. How do we energize every citizen to participate in lifelong learning? What about those who can't or don't participate in lifelong learning or change?
I wish I knew the answer to this. I think, I think it's an empirical question, which is why I'm hesitant, because I think it's an empirical question that I hope has been studied. If not, it should be studied, and it should be studied in this particular context, that I think is the intersection of civil engagement, just generally, and advocacy. So that's when people cannot speak for themselves, others need to speak for them. So yeah, the intersection of civil engagement and advocacy and tech literacy. So I'm taking this question very seriously, which is why I'm hesitant to give kind of, like off the cuff hypotheses, because I think it's very difficult. How do we motivate people to participate in democracy? The truth is, we don't know. Like, we've seen this living in the US, we've seen this in multiple election systems. People don't even vote. How do we get them to participate?
Nudging.
I mean, having said that, I'll just kind of reiterate some things that I mentioned previously, so I hope to not bore people. But I think that when it comes to technology, what I'm seeing that is a barrier to some people, and I'm not saying that if we overcome this barrier, it will solve this problem. because I think it's an empirical question, but some barriers that I am noticing. Lack of understanding of the potential consequences for better or worse. People don't fully understand how bad it could be or how great it could be if they would participate. And another barrier that I'm noticing is insecurity when it comes to technology and understanding it, especially for people who don't have this technical background. They will often say, oh, I can't really talk about AI ethics because I don't have technical background. It's false. But not having that kind of background does give people that insecurity. And then, or my mom asked me, what do you do now? And I said to her, well, now I work in AI ethics. And she's like, that's great. What's AI? I was like, okay, then. And so sometimes it's not insecurity, but just a knowledge gap. And these are very real barriers. So I would say if we're thinking about how to integrate more people to, participate in this and have this kind of civic engagement, to summarize what I say, first, we should take this question very seriously, because the truth is we haven't figured it out in the non-technical domain. And we need to think about why. But second, some barriers that are kind of surface level apparent in this specific domain is awareness and empowerment.
Beautiful, Ravit. I think I really echo what you said, that it's a serious question and we really need to look at it. And especially, I think, Richard, I would echo, this is why the diverse inputs kind of projects are so important, because they will get you voices from all over the world, and also bring in cases where you feel left out and why are you left out, why are you not included really. So all of those aspects is going to be important. I think for this question, I would also take one more opinion from Alice. Alice, if you do not mind adding on to what Ravit really said, it would be great to hear from you.
And if Alice has stepped away, because I did wonder if her voice around. Jerry, sorry, you've got your hand up.
Alice is here.
Oh, there's Alice.
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry, I was just doing some work in the background. What was the question, Jason?
So, so I think a lot of points were mentioned by Ravit, but it is mainly about how we energize every citizen to participate in lifelong learning. What about those who can't or don't participate in lifelong learning or any change?
Yes, I think this touches back on what I discussed earlier on human-centered design. We have to really build from a place of empathy and really trying, one, technology aside, let's just look at them and understand why is it that they can't, why is it that they don't want to, maybe is it an issue of willingness, or is it an issue of inability to? And depending on what angle that is, then we approach it from there. We've found out from our co-designing and co-creation sessions by engaging citizens that some of them resisted simply because they did not understand why they must embrace technology. They did not see the need to. Some just did not feel safe and thought that there's nothing else you can do. I don't feel safe, and that's it. But it's a lot of change management that needs to happen, but building on empathy and hand-holding people through it. There will be some that will choose not to participate completely, and that's okay too. We also cannot ignore the fact that there is also free will and choice involved in all of this. So I like how careful she was trying to be in really be giving a definitive or prescriptive answer. And so I think for me the critical point there is building from empathy and getting down to the root cause of that resistance or that refusal to adopt and to engage in digital economies or even lifelong learning.
Thank you, Alice. I think putting my business analyst hat on, I really understand where you're coming from, analyzing personas and looking at the empathy, the pain points, and what are the issues around it. We as technologists also need to look at those aspects when we are developing something. Over to you, Jerry, you have raised your hand.
I think forgive me for being self-indulgent. I'm always reticent to speak because so many other people want to, but this is kind of a taxonomy issue. When does a city stop being a digitally enhanced city and become a smart city? What's the distinction between a city deploying additional technologies subjectively because it imagines that
yeah, well, I mean, we had this in Milton Keynes where I challenged the local government here that we weren't a smart city and a city that experiments with technology. And we have more robots than any city in Silicon Valley here delivering food and goods and so on. We have 5G connected autonomous vehicles. So there was this idea that we were a smart city, but none of it was connected. There was no infrastructure in place. There was no code of ethics in place. It was siloed moments of the latest tech scattered around the city that didn't have any longevity. The hubs of data that were connecting these were switched off when the programs were done. I think it's a great point, Jerry, that you can have a lot of shiny stuff on display, drones whizzing around the city, but a smart city. Raghu, go on, you pick this up. I mean, for me, it's the connectivity of all of that. The ethical framework that goes with that, legislations, regulations, and of course, everything we've talked about today, the participation. Raghu, you can probably do a much better job than me on that. Let me unmute you or ask you to. There we go.
I'll be very brief on this answer. I believe a city becomes smart beyond just digitally enhanced when the tech infrastructure can respond to the varying situations or varying demands of city management. So if the traffic lights can collaborate with the cameras and change their red light to green light timing ratio at certain point in time in day, I believe this is a smart connection. And if there are just gadgets around there to do a certain work in a fixed frame, I would say that's yes, digitally equipped. That's my view of looking at it.
So just to your point quickly, there's a degree of subjectivity around the operation of traffic lights because whoever's actually pushing the button, if it's not autonomous, has a trade-off between environmentally friendly traffic flow against conflicting interests, against an improved experience for motorists, for example. And somebody somewhere or something somewhere has to make that decision.
Jerry, probably I lost a few words while you were speaking, so if you can please repeat.
Okay, so you mentioned traffic lights. Whoever is making decisions about when traffic lights change and how they operate is perhaps waving a flag of smart cityness, is nevertheless behaving in a subjective way because there are conflicting interests. There's a group of people who want traffic to flow in a particular way because it benefits the environment. There are a group of motorists who have a vested interest in the way that traffic behaves. There are pedestrians who have a vested interest in pedestrian-friendly motorist behavior. Isn't this rather subjective rather than something you can label smart? We're a smart city. This is really subjective policy, isn't it?
Very much. This is a very, very narrow description of what smart could be. Here when you said whoever is making that decision, I would say the algorithms are making that decision. So yes, and they could be acting in an authoritarian way, wherein compromises are happening in somebody's experience, or as you said, I would say, and I would like to get a little more philosophical here. In general, what is smart? Smart is any being who has perfect clarity of the objectives of life. and then they or the person or the entity or the organization is approaching those objectives in the most efficient, energy efficient, money efficient, resource efficient way. So now from very narrow, probably have gone to very, very broad. But if practically, if the city council, the city hall, the municipal, or whichever authority is responsible for looking after the quality of life in city, has a clear set of objectives to be achieved for the city, which has been debated on by the people, and then the deployment of technology is done in a way that we are going towards those objectives in the most energy efficient, money efficient, sustainability oriented way. Probably that would call it utopian smart. I'm not seeing a practical implementation of it right now, but yeah.
I think Alice also wanted to add something. She had raised her hand. Alice, would you like to add anything before I move on to Harold?
It was really just to compliment Raghu in saying that it comes back to the definition of smart, right? It's not just about the technology, but it's also the innovation part. It's also the data part. When we say smart cities, we also want to be data led, right? And so from those surveys, those data collections that we conduct, we find out one person might consider it smart. Whatever intervention we make might consider it smart. Another person might not. But really, at the core or the layer for us, what we're looking at is what problems are we solving, and what channels or what methods are we using and approaches to solve those problems? Because cities are complex systems. They're extremely complex systems. We will never satisfy everyone to the same level or reach a point where it always fascinates me how apparently there's over 3,000 definitions of smart cities out there. 3,000. That means, it's highly subjective, right? But at least the key themes that everyone else agrees on is technology, innovation, and data to improve lives. And so I think it's majorly looking at, is there a problem? If it is, how are we solving it and with what? So just to complement what Raghu was saying. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alice. And moving on to Harold. Harold, you wanted to add something to what Raghu is saying particularly, or if you have a question, yes.
Well, thousands of years ago, the cave people would call out, it's called C-U-L-L. They would call out stragglers who didn't follow the principles. And I assume the same thing will happen with the release of 6G, where you as an individual will be the internet. In other words, you walk out the door, you won't have a device in your hand, you'll simply talk and you'll get a response. That's the next generation of phones. It'll either come out in the 2030s, maybe in the 2040s, but that's the evolutionary status of the phone. So in that regard, I would define a smart city as a rules-based system of a human interface to machine. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Harold. Richard, if you would bring in Paul. Paul has raised his hand.
Yeah, happy to come in at this point. I've been listening very quietly in the background. And what came up for me has come up before in the field of smart cities and about digital citizenship too, is the extent to which where power sits. And I can remember one of the first books I ever read in the 90s on innovation, to the 80s actually, talked about two terms. One was called technology push, and that was essentially invention, good ideas put out there. But the literature morally went towards what was called need pull, that innovation should be pulled by need. And need's a very loaded term. It kind of suggests that need is expressed by people. And in the field of citizenship, right back into the philosophy area, citizenship, therefore, need pull was that the need has to be expressed by the citizens, and we respond with innovation. You might notice it happened around, I believe, around the early 90s and the sort of rise of computing and other technology in a really scaled way, was that the term was changed in textbooks from need pull to demand pull. And then because it's not okay to create need, you can create need by buying up all the water in the desert and then selling it to people if they can afford it. That's different to the idea of creating demand. That's more acceptable socially and very quickly suited all the large corporations to use advertising and other methods to create dependency rather than true need that was expressed. You use marketing to kind of persuade people, even hypnotize them, and the techniques of hypnosis were used to create that I do need it, but actually what you've done is you kind of forced it into people's heads. You design, innovation becomes about designing redundancy, so people can't use their phone, so they now need a new one. You create addiction, there's all kinds of stuff. And the only reason I mentioned that was around the same time that I was reading, there was a guy called Bob Sang, who in the UK created something called Citizen Advocacy. And that was great. It was for people in hospital in a very hierarchical environment, patients who maybe as a result of an operation couldn't speak properly, didn't have clear thoughts. And so a citizen became their advocate and would go into meetings and act as if that person was in their right mind. You know, and we know that things like power of attorney was there around that time. Citizen advocacy equalizes the relationship so that the small person and the big corporation are treated as if they're equal. And I just mention that because there's a route that I think is for moral smart cities, which is moral citizen advocacy. What would that mean? It means that the technology in the city can allow somebody that is about to be scammed, that the AI kicks in and says, you are about to be scammed, or I have cancelled that order because it's not the cheapest one you can get, and you can get one here. This isn't sustainable, what you're about to buy. It's time to turn the heating down because actually your body temperature is okay. Because all kinds of ways it could do it that would have to come from that the moral principle guiding it all was that the citizen was the priority and not the supplier. And so citizen advocacy is where AI in all kinds of ways could re-equalize the relationship and allow the citizen to have a fair life in relation to what we now know is a corporate driven agenda. And I don't think we can have any smart cities if what we do is create false demand that hasn't been established, hasn't been tested. The human beings become the trial, and we discuss how mad we were later when everybody in the smart city started to increase their suicidal feelings or whatever. And so I'll just build on what Raghu was saying, and Richard. We always need to ethically create rules and principles for this stuff, but it can't be running behind innovation that's allowed to run wild, and human beings are the human trial. The smart city, the AI would have to be biased. It would have to be coded in favor of the citizen and not the people that sell it.
Are you talking about one or two pieces of tech there, Paul? Because you've got conscious tech that may decide not to do something because of some process or personal reflection even, or you're talking about two techs, you know, one that wants you to have the can of Coke and one that's trying to protect you from the neurological marketing of the first one trying to get you to drink the Coke.
Absolutely. And you may well find that your in-the-ear hearing aid, and it won't be an implant for a very long time, and hopefully never in my view, but the implant, so the hearing aid in your ear, already, a friend of mine, he's in his 70s, he has a Bluetooth hearing aid that, you know, he can have Alexa linked to it. My God, Alexa, no, let's have something linked to it that can be trusted. And he's batting for him, is allowing him to realize his potential or for her to feel that she's safe. But that has to be coded in a moral.
Who would own that? The governments? I mean, it can't be corporations. We know this.
Well, that's why smart cities are not ready for humanity, and humanity should not be put in anywhere near them. And what I predict is you'll find that cities will rise up, which will create other kinds of inequality that will guarantee there's no smart tech in them. It will be like the organic farming movement, or playing an acoustic guitar instead of a high wattage music system. It will become a premium to have clear air in your head and in the city.
Yeah. Well,
Wonderful, wonderful. I think I love what Paul is saying, and this could go on. And just to be in time, Richard, there are a couple of questions in the chat if the panelists want to answer during the after party. But
okay,
I
all
cannot
right.
ask any more now, and I will hand over to Richard for the closure. Thank you.
Paul, I was chuckling because I find you so wildly entertaining, not because I disagree with anything that you said. The way you say things is just wonderful. And it strikes a chord with me so beautifully. Thank you so much. I'm going to listen back to what you said and spend about 4 days trying to work it out. So thank you so very much. Doesn't time fly? We're still 47 of us after 2 hours, and we started at 50 something, which probably would have been a lot more if I'd sent actually the right Zoom link out tonight. But that's a testament, isn't it, that we gather 50 of us even on the wrong link. So that's a beautiful community. So thank you. Jerry, do you want to thank the speakers since you did the great pleasure of introducing them?
I mean, the short, concise answer is yes, very much. That was a phenomenal event. It really was, and entirely because of the synergy between you guys and the different perspectives, and I think the internationalism element here was fantastic too. Enormous thanks for spending this evening with us and contributing and giving of your time. I think this was really worthwhile, and I'll have to review this carefully, and I won't be alone in doing that. Maybe we've made a difference, and we've widened people's horizons a little bit, in which case this is just wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you, Raghu, for getting us started. Ravi, thank you for all the contributions tonight. Alice, Anna, and same for you as well. You've brought so much different perspective. Like Jerry says, you've shared your time with us. Well, all of us have shared our time, but especially those that have prepared and wanted to bring some particular things. Thank you for the impromptu contributions that we had as well. I think Paul and Errol and Harold and probably others that jumped in. And thank you for, making it so special and being on this journey with us. You know where we are, mkai.org, team at mkai.org. We're on LinkedIn, and you know where I am as well if you've got any thoughts or suggestions or whatever. Always keen to hear them. So that's the official close of the evening. Jazel, thank you so much for moderating. You are a superstar as always. You're looking very tanned, by the way, if you don't mind me saying.
I just need to make more lights in the room, I think, rather than a small one. Yeah, I'll just do that. Yeah.
The sun has been kissing you over in India, I think.
Oh my goodness, yes, of course.
I'm only jealous, you know that.
Yes, but you'll be going soon, isn't it? So
That's
yeah, I'll be jealous that time.
I don't think I'm gonna go a different color. It's called red. So thank you everybody for this evening. Enjoy the rest of your day, your evening, wherever you're going next. We're back next month. We'll run next few months up until the end of the year. We'd love to see you back. Look out for us on Eventbrite and LinkedIn. You know where we are. We've got more wonderful events coming up. Love seeing all of you. You're such special, wonderful people. It's a great pleasure from all over the world. So that closes our event and then opens our after party. That was quite easy, wasn't it? And we can chat for a little bit and shoot the breeze and have a few different perspectives. So thank you for our contributors. Stick around if you like. And otherwise, I'm going to try and get us back to one main screen. Which I've never figured out how to do without clicking one by one. So perhaps the team can help me out. Thank you so much. Remove. And
Richard, sorry I'm late in this session today.
Hey, it's not a session without you, Renato. What's happening?
I found the information that Paul, I think you like. Paul, I found an article from Harvard, Institute from Harvard, that AI companies can give AI, democratizing AI to users. So the users can shape the governance.
Yeah,
I
I'm
found
sharing a
article
couple of
about
links about that. If that I've collected a few links as well. If you've got that link you could share, that would be great.
I can share in the WhatsApp.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
There's a few after show rock stars here tonight who who appear. Yangbu, it's always nice to see you.
Definitely. Incidentally, is just joining in from a earlier meeting that just finished on we're forming a JV with a company that actually has a lot to do with machine learning and smart cities quite a bit, including some
really?
Yeah, so they're working with DARPA and other groups, and they're one of the very few that I found that tend to be more fastidious than most companies are as far as ethics are concerned, that are particularly fastidious when it comes to facial recognition technology, given how it's been used in places like mainland China and the like.
Yes. We were talking about facial recognition earlier. Is there any sort of perspectives coming out about how to think about that in countries maybe where they haven't made a firm decision yet on their thoughts on it?
Yeah, not just that, but also voice as well. And I've heard this number came out from a research firm. It's Elizabeth Parkson company based in Dallas. So she actually has a LinkedIn newsletter, a pretty prolific one, no less, about all sorts of connected devices and trends in those. And she noted how, I think in the States, where things are heading in the next few years, it said that already half of US households have some sort of an internet connected TV, speaker, or something like that.
Yeah, the tech companies are trying to get in the homes, aren't they? Big time. Do you see that Amazon bought iRobot a few months back? Vipab, did you see that one?
Yeah. That one.
Yeah, so that's Roomba, isn't it? Let's be clear. Amazon don't care about vacuum cleaners. Let's just be very clear on this.
It's a data.
It's data. And
great product.
Yeah. But it's a product in the home with cameras on it, right, Errol? That's the key, isn't it? I mean, I'm being very biased here, obviously, but I'm playing devil's advocate. That's obvious, isn't it?
Well, they're already rolling that out across Whole Foods, Amazon, with their checkouts and whatnot.
Yeah. What did you think? So Paul was talking about technology to protect us from technology, or at least that was the angle I was getting from it. Who wants to talk a bit more about that? Because we are what we are, aren't we? There might be some religious folks here, and that's fine. And there might be some folks who think that we've come out of monkeys, but either way, you cannot deny that we have cognitive frailties that we just cannot overcome. And they've been exploited like crazy, right? I mean, big data and algorithms. And what do we do about that? How do we fight back? We can't do it cognitively, can we? Paul?
Well, I think the counter movement around that is underway, and I think it's starting with the crypto companies, and they're using various forms of distributed ledger technology, and then I think a group that I think would be very important for this community to become familiar with is the Holochain group, because they're looking at it more from a data management systems architecture standpoint to support distributed data management. You mentioned Amazon, and Amazon is based on centralized data management processing. And even the energy industry is moving from centralized production and distribution to distributed production and shared distribution. So I think the crypto companies are doing a great job of implementing the kind of data platform for data security, data anonymity, but then the network needs to be able to support that. So that's where a lot of stuff is coming out, and I'm seeing more and more interest and development around an edge-based, I'd prefer to call it an intelligence augmentation versus artificial intelligence. And what that platform is all about is that the two primary functions of that user interface, on one side, it's going to be that kind of internet guardian. So it protects the stakeholder from non-truths to getting hacked to all those kinds of things. But on the other side of it, which is related to like the election conversations and things like that, is that will be the perceptual orientation into the Internet of Things that has it's not consumerism based, which is the whole Alphabet and Amazon platform, is to get you to buy more and to basically entrain you about what Paul Levy was talking about, right? It's going to be about your wellness, analyzing like facial recognition, for example. Whenever you look at that smartphone and the camera is doing an analysis of your facial expression, it's analyzing it from a wellness perspective. And then it'll provide feedback loops, not to get you to buy something, but to get you to optimize your well-being. So it could play information back to you to say, your facial expression shows distress. Let's play your uplifting music channel on Pandora.
Paul, I've got to jump in, because isn't this like the health industry at the moment, that it's much better for the industry that we get sick and then we get healed rather than we stay well?
Right. Well, you need to redefine the industry as it's been kind of architected, and it's a sick care industry, not a well care industry.
Yeah.
And I mean, even all the way back to 2010, just in the United States alone, antidepressants, just as a single category, was a $20 billion annual revenue stream for the pharmaceutical industry. Insomnia meds.
That's a business that wants to keep people depressed.
Anxiety and insomnia are baseline physiological and psychological responses to chronic distress. So yeah, but what this does is, if we enable that type of capability, that will reorient the nervous system of the network toward well-being and optimizing that, not through more consumption of whatever. And it also enables distributed, highly efficient and effective well-being practices and modalities, because that edge-based AI is going to be analyzing, holistic medicine, naturopathic medicine, to cross-referencing clinical studies on best methodologies, and in support of that, what was also mentioned is voice analytics. There's a group out of Spain that can extrapolate like your body's chemical composition based on voice frequencies. So if we reorient this edge-based AI around well-being, and it utilizes biometric sensors that we already have integrated into a lot of the smart technologies, edge smart technologies, and we integrate that with well-being biometric technologies that the urban planners are using around air quality, water quality, and soil health. Now we have a platform to develop a well-being urban plan that is looking at well-being metrics as kind of the fundamental dynamics that they're evaluating for design.
The only thing I'd push back a little bit on that, Paul, is I guess what I was saying before about the fact that there's a bias towards tech push at the moment, and the rate of change is very fast to get products into the market that can be rubbish and dangerous. You know, 30 years ago, food took years, medicines longer before they were put in people's mouths. And so we have a rate of change which is impressive. But equally, we're starting to document the first longitudinal case studies around well-being. And we absolutely know that if you expose people to endless pictures they can't easily delete, the right to forget has been lost. And yet forgetting and purging and clearing out your mind is a really, really well-established medical fact. And that so by the time I get to 80 or 70 or even now 60, I can be getting early signs of dementia from information overload. Now, if you're a technophile and you love tech and you see optimistically tech as the way forward, the only danger of that is we're going to a solutions focus and we keep defining for people and for the world what we think well-being is. And you need well-being, but actually the assumption that I need well-being told by somebody alongside becoming a fear of missing out tech user is we don't know, but there are signs that this all at the moment could be doing more harm than good. We absolutely know now that if you get in a car, any modern car, you cannot drive it unless you've put your seatbelt on. What we are discovering, and it's some big numbers, is that that's making people, having got the seatbelt on, speed out of the house, and different kinds of accidents are forming. And we don't even know if that bit of tech in the long run is helping or hindering. What you technologize can also take away human faculty. And you know, we've got kids coming through to universities that don't know how to count, don't know how to write, and the tech will do it for them, so why would they need to? But we know that that links to depression and self-image in groups. Now, the technophiles go, well, this is just a transition to the, you know, the utopias. We just got to put up with this for a couple of generations and they'll thank us in the long run. But I still feel that for what we have to do, Sherry Turkle talks about this at Harvard, we have to deliberately slow down and go much more into a model of innovation around inquiry and discovery. Humble inquiry is what Edgar Schein calls it. Rather than default delivery and then worry about it later, or use advertising to tell them it is working for them, even though they're feeling more depressed than ever. We've all got to become a lot more nuanced, and that's inconvenient for shareholders.
I have to go, guys. Bye.
Okay, see you, Helen.
Helen, you had something to add, it seems.
I've been waiting to hear your voice all evening.
Yeah, no, I mean, so it's again another fascinating discussion. So well done. I was curious about something. So I have been trying to think in terms of the evolutionary path of smart cities. And at a starting point where you have things that are not at all smart, which means, you know, nothing is connected, everything works in isolation, there's no sharing of information. And thinking about the different evolutionary phases of a smart city, where you maybe a first phase, maybe you connect the unconnected. And then maybe you have a phase where you have islands of automation. And then maybe you have another phase where you have islands of automation that are now connected. And then you have this increase in interconnectedness and interdependency and interoperability. And so what that enables, I think, is an evolutionary path as opposed to a flip the switch and now everything is a smart city. Okay, so I was curious what other people think of that and if there's a good model out there that is worth sharing.
Well, that I'm actually very passionate about that process, and even the way you framed the question is almost like requiring or biased toward a one style solution design. And that is absolutely not the case. What we need in a complex, if we acknowledge complex adaptive systems, that complex adaptive system, which should have a baseline bias around vitality or regeneration. So a lot of the, the mainstream topic or vernacular is still around sustainability, and we've already gone way beyond sustainability as a requirement just based on planetary boundaries. So the design of smart cities, if it has an orientation around resilience and regeneration, is going to be completely dynamic depending on where you are with environmental dynamics, social dynamics, and the physical dynamics of what exists, human-made systems, and what the ecology is presenting within that bioregion. So where a lot of the organizations that are focused on how do we move forward with, the first decision that the UN Environmental Program and their Digital Ecology Initiative asked was, should we use technology or should we not use technology? The answer was an emphatic yes. We need to use technology because it already exists and is an amazing tool for us to progress forward. Where a lot of the organizations are right now is a focus on accelerators, because we haven't moved fast enough, because we've tried to create these homogeneous solutions that work everywhere, and that's not how life works. The other side of it is the creation of a resource library. So for example, accessing fresh water is going to be very different depending on where you are in the world. Are you at source water, or do you need to dig wells? Do you need to desalinate that water? Do you need to use evaporative collection systems? So there's this kind of consolidation of different kinds of tools based on the dynamics of that bioregion. So I hope that makes sense. So the design process, which is what my focus has been on, has to be dynamic in that it can take in the data streams that are specific to the bioregional dynamics of wherever you're looking at on the planet, whether it's desert, high altitude mountains, or whatever. And then it starts to correlate that with actually biomimicry methodologies. I'll add to the string, Maurice Conti did a fantastic TED talk on what he's calling intuitive AI. And it's basically using AI as a tool, not as a supplement or a replacement for human cognition, which is what Paul is talking about. And the other important bias that needs to be built in to these tools is empathy toward biophilia, which was mentioned earlier. If we can create, if the technology embraces a connection with humans to life systems, then we're going to avert a lot of the technological kind of decomposition or entropy that Paul mentioned earlier, about where the brain neurologically is wired to be as efficient as possible, and convenience that is a underlying emotional attraction to a lot of the technologies around consumerism is a natural attraction. If we have to think less, if we have to do less, our neurological responses are we're conserving energy. It's a more efficient way, but we can't replace the human cognition, creativity, innovation, social connections, emotional connections to the environment empathically with the technology, which is what's happening. And to also address Paul's comment, the war is underway. There are entities that are developing very advanced artificial intelligence tools. The finance industry is a perfect example of that, where there are financial offices that are using highly complex AI analytic tools to manipulate the market. And the majority of us don't have access to that information and that kind of comprehension of market triggers and analytics. So I feel that a group like this, that's why I honor that this group exists. We generally and very practically represent the counter movement to other forms of artificial intelligence that's being implemented to benefit the very few and not the all, as in the entire ecology. That's why we're hurling in this very rapid trajectory toward a very dangerous outcome. So sorry, but that's kind of, I think, where we're at.
Thanks, Paul.
Did I freak everybody out now?
Possibly.
There's a lot to unpack here, and the Paul and also both of you, Paul Levy and your points about, because first I'd say in the narrow sense, you mentioned the issue of healthcare and the sick care, that it does bring to mind. I'm not sure whether you interacted with him or his NGO, Games for Change, that he founded back in the early noughts, and he stepped down in the mid-teens, but he's still active in that space, in the space of we call serious games. And what he proposed, what he often likes to open a talk by, is thinking, what if instead of prescribing a pill for an illness, what if a doctor prescribes a game instead? Like those types of things where you actually start moving towards a healthcare system that's more explicitly about healthcare as opposed to sick care. That's one. And secondly, I don't know, my impression is I think many missed this when it came out, but it was buried within the middle of a report that the city of Zurich and ETH Zurich released in 2011 about the concept, the 2000 watt society. And in it, what they mentioned was that actually, to their surprise, though they were quite prescient about it, as we know now, that they had three different scenarios. They had one that was continuation of trends that were already underway. Second was a situation that there are severe resource constraints around things like because of climate, because of just generally environmental constraints. And then third was a scenario of unlimited, it's the technologization of everything, as they called it. And it turned out just from their simulations that the unlimited technologization scenario led to the doomsday outcome of a surveillance state. And this was back in 2010, 2011, when they were producing this.
That is a fantastic reference. And the social scientists would confirm what you're saying, in that what is the social narrative? And that narrative, through their whatever connections to media is, whether it's, YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or, TV entertainment, the narrative has predominantly been apocalyptic, dystopian, which has led to the behavioral issues that Paul mentioned earlier, right? Anxiety, depression, insomnia, and so on. So the counter strategy that's underway is to create an edge-based AI. Many of us are calling it Sophia for a lot of reasons. I reference Jarvis from the Iron Man series, that was Tony Stark's personalized artificial intelligence that protected him from the shadow aspects of the web, as well as, you know, his perceptual lens into anything and everything on the internet. But this counter initiative is to create that edge-based user interface at least. And that user interface is going to be oriented toward a more benevolent future. And that's that empathy toward biophilia, the love of, you know, the connection and love of life systems. And we all will have our own unique orientation. Like some of us like dogs better than humans because they're more authentic in their behavior many times. To, you know, each individual's kind of orientation and perception around life. So I'll look up the YouTube video from Maurice Conti, and then I think another important kind of video clip from a recovering attorney put together a documentary called "The People versus State of Illusion." And what he talks about is how little data we can actually cognitively process relative to the amount of information that's around us in our environment. So the advertising industry has figured out how, and that's why I left the communications industry, because I saw how that was being utilized, how easily it is to entrain people to perceive the world in a certain way and to behave in a certain way. So this edge-based UX has a completely different orientation. It has, you know, individual well-being and empathy toward biophilia, toward the laws of nature and life systems in general. So I'll look those up real quick and add them to the chat.
Yeah, and you reminded on this question of narrative, actually, that so I think a couple of years ago, what was brought up is that if you compare like how technologies, especially robotics, namely how it's treated in a cultural narrative, you compare the US, namely Hollywood, and Japan, if you compare those two, it's quite a dramatic difference where like the Hollywood narrative is how machines are in competition with humans, how it's framed, whereas much of the Japanese cultural narrative, at least from what's exported around the world, is that machines, robots, well, they're human helpers in contrast.
Right. Yeah. The difference between augmented intelligence and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, because if you compare, say, things like Terminator versus Pokemon, if you compare those two franchises, and you could see that contrast quite starkly.
People are so. Oh, absolutely. I'm with you, and that is literally what you're defining. And if I mispronounce your name, I apologize. Is it Yangbu?
Yangbo.
Yangbu.
Yeah, say in French or German, you'll be pretty close.
Okay. That is the battle line. You are defining the front line of how technology is being used, how it's being perceived, and how it's how it's being received, you know, by different communities. Here's the second one. I think you guys will find these two links intriguing. The first YouTube video is Maurice Conti's talk about intuitive AI and his orientation, and I'm collaborating with him, by the way, for the implementation of the Atlas Center, is utilizing AI to develop, using it as a tool for design, which is critical for what we need to be doing for urban design and rural design for smart cities, right? And interestingly enough, when you watch that video, the AI, because it's not biased in where it's getting its information, it ultimately ends up designing things that are biomimicry based, because nature already it's incredible, it's fascinating, it has so much design that we need to learn from. And he uses an example of where they wanted to design a drone, a 4-propeller drone, and the AI ended up, it's a little bit of a spoiler alert, but the AI ended up designing the chassis for this drone that matched the skeletal structure of a flying squirrel, because that is the ideal design. So there's this link between AI design accessing biomimicry resources, which is what we absolutely need to do in our urban planning and design, so we can ultimately harmonize our communities with the ecology, which we're way out of whack right now. We're very parasitic in how we exist. We need to utilize symbiosis as a modeling, so we can harmonize within nature, for our own existence, and so we don't keep polluting the planet, and ultimately going to kill ourselves. So
I'm glad you brought it up, since one of the best examples in practice of, say, if you take like biomimicry and whatnot, and even if it's not entirely intentional around this, but it ended up being the outcome, is if you really dive into at various layers, from the macro to the most granular layers of how the Tokyo metropolitan area is arranged, that in fact that to this day you can even break it down into even the smallest neighborhood level, all the way to the much broader level. And two professors, one of them, he's written a lot around this, Matthias Eschenove. Does the name sound familiar to you, Paul?
That does sound familiar.
Yeah, he wrote, it was the first in a series that Next City magazine did about 10 years ago, called Informal City Dialogues. And they opened it with Tokyo as an example of, it was basically titled somewhat provocatively, but actually quite accurately, and it called How Tokyo Grew from a Slum, basically. And because if you were in Tokyo in the 50s, that would be places like Kibera, Kenya, or Dorai, Mumbai today. That was Tokyo in the 50s. And when I was in Mumbai for much of early 2019, followed by Delhi for the balance of 2019, that my impression was, if you happen to be in Tokyo in the 1960s, that's Mumbai today, effectively, or Hong Kong a decade after that, Singapore a decade after that, Hong Kong a decade after that, Seoul a decade after. So it's really looking at these examples that what I find is that how many, like both whether academic or practitioner in this space, in these spaces around smart cities, so how many have seriously tried taking a look at those actual examples? Mm-hmm. Because it feels like so many try to spin a very novel flavor and such around that, and yet have the impression is, okay, are you not ignoring what has already been working for decades? And are you not just ignoring that? Why do you see that presents so novel, where you have examples that have been working for decades?
Right. You bring up a very important concept. Now I think one of the leading entities for this kind of human transformation in how we exist on the planet has come out from the IPCC scientists, predominantly environmental scientists, looking at planetary boundaries, combined with global economists that are promoting the concept of circular economies, right? And so this collaboration is under the title of Earth for All. And look at, and they're already producing a significant amount of content to convey, educate, and train, make awareness of how we need to move forward. But that was funded, this last initiative was funded by the Club of Rome, which originated, the Club of Rome originated in around 1972, and its first sponsored initiative was the MIT Limits of Growth analysis, which in 1972, they did a they created a multi-systemic simulator, a modeling platform that calculated in 1972 that we would have a multi-systemic collapse by approximately 2020, which recently a former KPMG consultant went back through and added empirical data from the 1972 analysis, and it further validated this multi-systemic collapse based on the use of this simulator, which is key because I believe that we need to create an AI-ish analytic tool to help us for design. But the Club of Rome has also supported the concept of what was a German word called Bildung. And Bildung is very deeply explained in a book called The Nordic Secret, which is what you're kind of talking about, Youngbu. They, in the Nordic region, just about 100 years ago, was stricken in poverty. And that's a very harsh part of the world to not have shelter or food or whatever. And from a very peaceful process, there were no wars, there were no revolutions or any of that stuff. So they kind of reverse engineered what happened 100 years ago that caused that part of the region from going from extreme poverty to being one of the world's kind of leading areas in civil infrastructure, education, transportation, all of that stuff. And they narrowed it down to the implementation of this concept called Bildung. And very simply put, Bildung is about personal development. So at all levels of the society, they decided to support how can we help the well-being and personal development of all the individuals within our community. And that was the catalyst. And it kind of goes back to the wisdom traditions of you need to first ask yourself, who am I? And then after you kind of reflect on that question and you gain knowledge and wisdom around that, then the next practical question is, how can I serve? And that was the catalyst in the book, the Nordic Secret, is this process called Bildung, which relates to Paul Levy's comment earlier. We need to effectively connect human benefit with how we represent ourselves from an infrastructure and built environment on the planet. And those two things need to come together.
And I wonder, have they made any cross references? We got the Nordics, so that's one. Because where I see some both convergence and disjunct distribution along those lines and it's really the two places where if you blend together, it will be because both are in somewhat in terms of built environment on the frontier in certain ways and laggards in certain other ways. But if you were to bring that Nordic approach, so Northern European approach, and then if you were to bring that, mesh it together with the democratic East Asian approach, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, those three, and here's often you could sum up as say, in democratic East Asia, they already have probably what is, you could say, all around the optimal, the best performing urban form, as in how the built environment's laid out and such. yet they flail at decarbonizing energy supply. And you have the opposite situation in Northern Europe, where they're doing very well comparatively on decarbonization, yet they have much more severe problems, however severe they are in Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. But Nordics and actually all of Northwestern Europe, they have much more severe problems with people being priced out from city centers. So there's a lot, so both are at the frontier in some ways, but there's a lot that can be learned by blending these two together. And incidentally, here locally in the States, around the New York area, I'm a group what we call the Effective Transit Alliance. And that's actually what we're trying to do is, okay, given how New York is behind in so many of these different areas, well, now as far as North America, well, North America now becomes the proving ground for actually blending those in. And that's actually how we're trying to position things here on my end.
Yeah, I think one of the concepts that would be helpful for you and Helen actually is the numerous urban planners that are highly connected to environmental issues are referring to the 20-minute city design as kind of like the ideal model as a concept. And obviously that will look very different depending on where you are in the world, because your building materials are going to be different. How you produce fuel and energy is going to be very different. Are you going to use geothermal energy? Are you going to use hydro energy? Are you going to use electrolysis to convert to hydrogen? So it'll be unique based on environmental dynamics, right? Bioregional dynamics, from everything from materials to how you process your waste. But the 20-minute concept is seems to be, because we are going to sprawl, and it's how we sprawl in the urban environments, which are the urban environments account for 70% of all of our pollutant emissions, right? So there's a very high priority in how we redesign these urban environments and sprawl from them, which we've done a very poor job. I mean, one of the ideas that I think you would really like regarding democratic Asia is Toyota has come up with a pilot city called the Woven City. And it has that, they're using as much public transportation. There's a lot of walking and bicycling integrated into it. And then the smart part of that, that they're implementing, but it's an integrated systems platform, which is the biggest issue we're dealing with right now, because urban planning is usually siloed. You have energy, yes, you have building, you have transport, blah, 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 right? I'm going to share with Richard a concept deck that I'm putting together, or I put together and shared with the Royal Society of the Arts. The RSA has a mission right now that's called Design for Life. And Design for Life is oriented from the, let's call it the human consciousness orientation. And then the World Economic Forum has put together a similar platform, but from a what do we need to do from a whole systems design standpoint for urban centers. What does our infrastructure need to look like? And to accommodate affordable housing, transport, food production, water usage, waste management, all of those things. So these concepts and frameworks are coming together. So anyway, I'll share that with Richard, and then I'll leave it up to Richard to see, how best to share that with this group. But I consider, MKAI part of the rebellion. We need to counter the existing controlling entities for data management, energy production, and start to seed communities in different parts of the world that use these different dynamics and different solution sets to create these more harmonized community systems within the biosphere. And we're going to have to do that while there's going to be an increase in intensity and frequency of catastrophes, because we're beyond the tipping point. So it's kind of like a disaster recovery process. There's a group that I just got in contact with that was formed because of COVID, using technology to help solve COVID-related issues. It's called the U.S. Digital Response, and it's a nonprofit, uses a lot of volunteers, so it's the similar model of what Richard has put together for MKAI, and to counter these big industry and institutional efforts that have a lot of inertia and will not and won't give up their power and control. They're not going to do it. So there needs to be a counter movement. And how do we do that?
I think there is one ray of hope, I think, in that, Paul. I mean, I 100% agree with you, and I don't think any legislation, regulation, governance, corporate policy, mandates, or whatever will change anytime soon. But the people in there, I think, can. And I think that's a reminder to all of us that all of our actions count. Because we're building a new narrative in society, and look at corporations, right? Even the worst corporations, and I see your hands up, Helen. I don't want to monopolize, so I'll be over to you in a second. Corporations, largely won't do sex trafficking, right? And they won't do things with narcotics and drugs. And so clearly there is a moral compass in these organizations, and that moral compass currently doesn't extend to protecting people and the planet and the environment. It just doesn't. Gas flaring in the Niger, yeah, sounds great, let's do it. But it will, and it has to, that you have someone in Nestle, would say something radically different to what they said 5 years ago without even realizing there's something different, because of course we wouldn't do gas flaring in the Niger. Of course we wouldn't do sex trafficking. How do we put these in the same category when they're separate, but they should be? And I think there is just a ray of hope for what it's worth. Anyway, Helen, you've probably got something 5 minutes to say.
No, I have to go too, but so I agree that there is some moral compass in some of the technology companies, and I came from that industry, so maybe I just kind of let that one go for now. But I did have a super quick question for Paul, because you piqued my curiosity. So why do you want to call the edge-based AI Sophia?
That comes from most of the developers that I've been interacting with. I think there are origins in the name Sophia that has prophetic value, spiritual value. There's also a rebalancing of masculine and feminine in that motivation. So that's really the main thing. I combine, the use of using, the Jarvis example, which is, if you really look into the archetype of Jarvis is it's a service leader role. Jarvis is there to help Tony Stark, thrive and be vital in life. He protects him from threats, and he, tries to enhance his quality of life. So for me, it's neutral. For some of the developers, there, like I said, there's I think a spiritual, prophetic, and I don't like gender as much as masculine and feminine rebalancing aspect to it.
So the other reason I was asking in particular on Sophia is that there's a robot, the humanoid robot Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know if that creates confusion or if that is mutually reinforcing.
I thought that as well. Yeah.
Curiosity. So that's why I wanted to go there.
Yeah. Well, then you also have Watson.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot. It just depends on your focus. And I think there's going to be like, for example, in this edge-based AI user interface, I think what we need to offer the stakeholder versus the user, the stakeholder a choice. They may want, they may want Carl Sagan to be, this AI representation of who they're dealing with when they're interacting with the internet. Other people may want some fictional character, they may want R2D2 or whatever. So that's where the dynamicism needs to be, and individualism needs to be acknowledged. Like I personally, like for navigation, when I'm driving from point A to point B, I prefer sonically to hear a woman's voice than to have a guy tell me to turn left and right. And so I think there needs to be this personal preference that is embraced in how we integrate the technology. I mean, if you just look at the cognitive sciences and how many biases we have, in fact, I use a chart on that, on how dynamic that is. It's going to be very complicated so you have to let the end user, the stakeholder, kind of design how that interface is, so it can be built toward their personal preferences.
Okay, so that helps. So I was just kind of curious. Thank you.
If you've got to go,
okay. Always great to connect.
See you soon, Helen.
Okay.
Thank
nice
you.
meeting you.
All the best. Bye.
All the best.
Sorry, Richard, for probably adding too much, but the group
is fantastic.
They're on the cusp of where we're at, and we're running out of time.
I know.
From an environmental standpoint, if the environmental scientists, and they keep retracting, the time frame, originally it was 2050 was in the narrative, right? Then it got
2050 anymore.
Yeah, if you compare, it's quite stark comparison. If you compare now versus the original Sokolov and Pakala paper from 2005, the wedges, because then it was just hold all emissions flat through 2050. And then it became 80%. And then now it has to be net zero, not just in developed countries, but globally.
Right.
So now there was an interview published, a podcast published by Akshat Ratty, who's lead reporter on the Bloomberg Green Beat, with Bryony Worthington, who was one of those who helped draft the original UK climate change law. And what she was basically saying is their argument there was that as far as the UK is concerned, that, well, if it's highly doubted, but if it's going to cost any premium or anything, well, the UK thought nothing about being a first mover into the hydrocarbon era in the mid-19th century. So, I mean, why couldn't the UK pull something off in terms of transitioning away from hydrocarbons?
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, if you go back into, they added lead for decades to fossil fuel to increase its combustibility. And so we were emitting lead, which we knew was a toxin for decades. So anyway, and I think, Richard, I'm with you. I have to be with you in that there's optimism. Otherwise I spiral into despair. If you look at a lot of the data points, it is quite despairing. However, the potential to move forward in a very positive way remains. I mean, human creativity and innovation is our greatest gift. But I think our focus needs to be on, quite frankly, the early adopters, kind of the front of the bell curve. That I think is going to be critical. I think if we try and do, a global mass kind of movement, it's just not going to happen. There's still so many people that are unaware that there's even any issues going on. They're just trying to survive. So
I mean, I'm here in Prague, and it's plastic here, plastic there. There's no plastic in the UK anymore. There's no plastic spoons in the UK anymore. Here, it's everywhere. It's just like the message hasn't got here. I think go on, Yangba.
Yeah, and even there's a podcast episode with Ian Bremmer of the Eurasia Group and with Yashamanka back in the spring, when he basically put forward this whole concept of what he basically called a G0 world, that you're not going to really rely on the traditional actors here. His approach more so, he basically said that the reason that at the very least he is actually a lot more optimistic about the climate issue than how the COVID pandemic was managed was the fact that there was even any sort of consensus in the first place around the Paris Agreement back in 2015, that you actually managed that consensus. And given how the narrative has changed with climate, if you went back 20 years, it was about things like polar bears and the like. And now everyone's being affected in one way or another. So that's actually what is going to really make it a lot more salient, that you can't take the stance of inaction much longer, if any longer. The fact that, well, you're facing it here and now, it's already present, it's now already clear and present.
Just posting in the chat, I remember what I was going to say, is that people talk about climate deniers, and my LinkedIn algorithms have really tuned me into a lot of climate dialogue recently, and I'm very clear that these are not climate deniers, they're climate angers. They have moved through the grief process, right? They're not denying it, they're just flipping angry. And the problem with that is that we know what comes after anger is depression. They're going to get depressed, these people are.
I personally know someone who is in that state, who actually, he's a sparring partner with one of the groups I volunteer with, but he basically keep pushing back on him when he says as if we should be planning for 6 degrees of warming and such. And he's basically just planning, okay, so break down like people losing their know-how and such, going back to fossil fuels and the climate overheating and such, like people losing their know-how around clean tech. It's basically, I just keep pushing back on that, and it's.
But I'm talking about the people who don't believe in it here. I think they're going through a grieving process because I think they do know. And I think it's hitting them really hard. And I think that the change for them and the loss of all this that they hold dear and so on is moving them through that process. And I think them, the 50%, the whatever, the 60% in the US, they're going to become depressed very quickly.
Yeah. I'm with you 100%. There's a, her name is Clover something. She's in our LinkedIn network, Rich. She was an adolescent that started attending, UN conferences and COP sessions and things like that. And now she's in her 20s. And now her primary, she called out the UN and all the leaders that were at the UN at last year's at COP 26. She basically said, you have failed. You failed as leaders. And they could not deny it. It's like, yes, we failed. I mean, you look at when the SDGs or when the Paris Agreement was formulated, and we haven't done shit, significantly disrupted, that pattern. But she's someone that is focusing on the Gen Y, her generation, Gen Z, Gen Y, and they've even termed or coined a term called ecocide. And that is their catalyst.
Yeah, it's crucial.
yeah, there are so many
You
Texans.
talk about it, Paul, don't you, on LinkedIn?
Yeah, yeah, and
it's got to be a crime.
And that's where the legal groups are moving toward. They're actually, they're calling it a, not an inheritance tax, but a windfall tax that they want to impose on the fossil fuel industry.
I mean, we're being recorded here, Paul, but you've got to put executives in prison. That's not happening enough. We're fining companies a amount of money that is basically no big deal, which incentivizes the behavior. Do whatever you want, you risk the fine, you write it off, and you carry on, and you've made more money than the fine costs anyway. I mean, every tech company does that, and nobody goes to prison.
No, the tobacco industry is a great example of that, right? Like, for years and years and years, you know, they just kept on advertising and saying, you know, there's no ill health effects. That finally tipped. But now what they're doing, subversive advertising. If you look in a lot of the media, look at how many actors are smoking in movies and TV shows. So it's like this subtle thing. It's like, okay, well, if the audience relates to that character, well, they're smoking. So that's how they move through. It's not advertising, but they're sponsoring the production of content that includes that character smoking. It's insane. This is where this edge-based AI that has an influence on perceptual orientation is absolutely key. And most of us want to live a healthy, productive life. So I think, you know, that's the gap. There's anyway, more to share. Richard, I'll send you the deck, because I do believe that it is at the very forefront of, you know, what we're talking about. And then you tell me, you know, what you know, how you think it would most benefit the MKAI community, because we're going to definitely need this community to develop this integrated platform that goes from, you know, its first throughput is urban planning, but the feedback loop is going to run through the stakeholder community. And that's going to involve everything from cryptocurrencies to DAO types of social networking around elections and everything else. So this community that is coming at it from a compassionate and empathetic orientation is going to be key to mobilize this.
Yeah, I just got told off for talking too loudly in the lobby of this hotel, so I'll try and maintain my energy level. But I mean, so that's what we're building, right? We're up to more than 300 now. Now this isn't the community that we chat with on WhatsApp. This is a new dedicated community being managed in a platform. We're going to turn it into a DAO. We're going to incentivize those, you know, with autonomous payments, you know, from contribution of what they do. And we can set them any question, Paul. It's aimed at AI ethics, of course, because it's where we start, it's where we began. But it can be aimed at anything. You know, 79 countries in there already, right?
Yeah. Will you, Richard, will you look into, and Youngbu, you as well, I think it would be fantastic if the two of you would look at this group called the US Digital Response. It's
US Digital Response, and yeah.
Their URL is usdigitalresponse.org. And you know, that may be a key strategic alliance for MKAI to connect with, because their orientation is using technology to solve real world issues. And they're operating as a, you know, as a .org. So hopefully the ethics part is fundamental to their existence.
So yeah, US Digital Response. So yeah, it seems that I think I do remember actually. Oh, it seems quite convenient. One of my lab mates from MIT ended up in there, Rebecca Haywood, and
oh, very cool. Oh,
yes.
Well, Youngbu, we'll have to talk about the connection to MIT. And I have a lot of MIT colleagues everything from on the economic side to the former sustainability initiative that MIT was involved with that got killed when the certain leadership at MIT were replaced by fossil fuel industry sponsors. So, but MIT is going to play, I think, a really critical role moving forward. And even the origins of the limits of growth simulator that was done in 1972, that is a model for what we need to do moving forward as far as like creating these rapid and dynamic analytic simulator generators at a bioregional level. So the computational capacity and the innovation capacity out of MIT, I think, needs to be revitalized in a particular.
Yeah, they definitely have that capacity. And at least my posting was specifically the MIT Energy Initiative, and when that was new, there was a lot of a talk. I remember they were trying to get an EES, an Energy Environment Sustainability Group, off the ground around the end of the noughts at MIT. And furthermore, what they've actually had there in terms of those working on those issues, I'd say their most robust division as far as these issues are concerned is really none other than their Department of Urban Studies and Planning. Actually, that's probably their most robust of all. Sloan School, they're pretty good at it, especially Sturman's team over at Systems Dynamics, and ditto with ESD or Engineering Systems Division, where most of my lab mates were situated.
I'm putting into the chat an MIT document from 2012, where that was MIT's original kind of initiative around creating, academic programs around sustainability. It ended up getting, like I said, getting killed. But there are components of MIT that keep coming up in this work, and a lot of the tenured professors that were involved with that, they just went silent. So they saw the hijacking, right? They were part of that hijacking. So you might find that of interest. I can introduce you to Edmund, who was part of that at MIT.
What's his surname? It's not Carlaval, is it right, or different? Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, we were pretty close there. We were on the Sustainability Summit organizing committee, and yeah, he was pretty active around Sloan Impact. So very familiar names here. Jason J, also from the Sloan School side, Jason J, and yeah, a whole bunch of these, honestly. And
so do you know Navroop Sandeev?
Oh, and Navroop. Well, not while she was post at MIT, because she wasn't there after I left, but I met her a few times when she was in New York. So Navroop, yeah,
she's focusing on the economic. What does the economic system need to look like? So, but anyway.
And back then was also, I think that was right around the transition, because I remember the champion of those was their former institute president, Susan Hockfield, and then it was a change. Yeah, that change in leadership means changes in priorities, and they also got racked by several issues later on with the former professor, now disgraced, Walter Lewin. Like they were racked by a whole host of issues.
And now what's going on, from what Richard mentioned, Edmund is going after these former. I mean, he's had conversations with the Federal Bureau of Investigations about this, because now there's I'm going to call it entrails from that whole hijacking in MIT are now counseling to Joe Biden's and John Kerry's sustainability initiative. So it's tainted. that intelligence and kind of advisory from MIT has some taint to it. So there's legal issues engaged right now, Richard, where they're going after part of this, and this has been going on for a very long time, where there were certain people put into positions of authority that are not what I consider authentic leaders, but they're narcissists in that they'll support whatever, mostly making money.
Yeah, understood. And that validates the concerns that were shared with two other colleagues of mine who runs a group called the Smart Cohort. Well, they're currently out, one's out in the Bay Area, the other's in Chicago. But this is what they were explaining to me about how, in terms of all of this, where things are going, especially as far as urbanism and built environment matters are concerned, this is what they were literally telling me, that they're finding Boston and San Francisco and Bay Area stagnating, while the cutting edge is now, you got Chicago, Toronto, New York. That's where they're observing things moving to. So I was briefing them a lot about what NYU doing with the Marin Institute. I collaborate on the projects there, the Transit Costs Project, and Columbia have been doing pretty well. At least they've been very open to at least international exchange and all of that. Toronto, for sure, very underrated, by the way. Most of the Canadian universities, they're quite underrated, especially in the States. And then Chicago, they're now beginning to jump on that. So that actually validates what they've been telling me as well, how they're not really getting much headway at all in the Bay Area. And they're having a hard time with the Boston area as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Anyway, well, I don't want to, Richard, thank you. Thank you. I totally respect all of your effort and emotional investment in creating. And yours, Paul. And we will, I think, however I can help, we just need to, I think, acknowledge the engagement of our challenges in a very progressive and proactive manner is essential. And so let's see if we can do this. And then
yep. And I just let my email addresses in the chat for you, Paul.
Oh, okay. Are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm very active, no less. So you can find me there pretty easily.
I'll send you an invite, because that's how Richard and I also
perfect.
That's our kind of our ongoing, direct and indirect communication stream.
Perfect. Yeah.
Because we can see what each of us are, currently engaged in. So I'll send you an invite through LinkedIn as well, and we'll cultivate this community of imaginal cells, which Richard knows what I mean by that. The creators of the regenerative version of civilization is really what that is. So with that, I bid you both and everyone adieu. And I will see you on the flip side.
Yeah, you take care, everybody.
All right, cheers.
Definitely.
Bye.